Chapter 1051. There was not only one assassin outside the window, but a group of them. Wei Wei Bai had just run a few steps when she had no choice but to lie down to avoid the bullets. She turned around and saw Fu Beijia, who was hiding under the window and fighting back. His face was cold and serious, without a trace of his usual carefree attitude. The glass shards hit his head, and his black hair was covered with fine glass shards, emitting a dazzling light. Fu Beijia had brought people, but not many, only a few bodyguards. They would not be able to hold on for long. Wei Wei Bai's call for help did not respond, so she quickly scanned the surroundings. Then, under the cover of Fu Beijia, she secretly ran to the back door. When she opened the back door, she saw Fu Beijia looking back at her worriedly. He also used his body to block her escape route, so that the bullets would not hit her. That self-sacrificing look, that look in his eyes, was like that of a loyal dog that was abandoned. Wei Wei Bai felt that she was a scumbag. She originally wanted to give him a comforting look or something. After all, it was not easy to increase his favorability. She had to go through a lot to increase his favorability. This kind of scene where he was being assassinated was the most suitable to increase his favorability. But before she could give him a flirtatious look or something, a bullet swept past her feet. She immediately retreated a few steps and ran out of the door. She was even more of a scumbag. In Fu Beijia's eyes, she was probably a person who would kick him away at the critical moment to escape. Yes, she was indeed a scumbag. Wei Wei Bai ran out of the back door, only then did she realize that she was too naive. The back door was also sealed, and a few cars with people were outside at the same time. When they saw her rushing out, they did not hesitate to raise their guns. Without the system, she did not have a life guarantee, and did not have any means to save her life. At this moment, Wei Wei Bai clearly felt the feeling of death. She was about to take the risk of being hit by the bullets and return to the restaurant. A strong hand grabbed her arm. Wei Wei Bai was shocked and turned her head, only to see a familiar face. Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe was wearing the low-key clothes of a rickshaw driver, a tattered hat, and yellow wax paint on his face. He looked like a beggar on the street. Was he in disguise to follow Fu Beijia? Wei Wei Bai was right. Li Xinghe was indeed following Fu Beijia. Upon his successful return to the south, he found that his father was dead. But for him to smoothly gain power and consolidate his position as heir, everyone hid this secret and kept the governor's corpse in ice. As soon as Li Xinghe returned and cried bitterly, he immediately calmed down and began to accept power. After a series of games, he finally stabilized his position. And if he wanted to completely consolidate his position, then he must kill Fu Beijia. This was because his father's death was absolutely irreconcilable. If he, as a son, could not even take revenge for this, then how could he convince the masses? This was also the reason why he went to the north again and planned another assassination. Wei Wei Bai did not have a database, so she did not know Li Xinghe's twists and turns. She did not see any small missions issued. She directly shook off Li Xinghe's hand and frowned. It's you. Li Xinghe revealed a bitter smile. If I knew you were here, I wouldn't have let them shoot. Wei Wei Bai grasped the small bag in her hand and looked at him expressionlessly. Why did you come back again? Aren't you afraid Fu Beijia will kill you? Li Xinghe's eyes became gentle. Right now I'm the one killing him, not the other way around. You go first, there's a car there that can take you to a safe place. Now is the critical moment of the battle, you will be affected if you stay here. Download the https://www.sashu.com/download the full article, https://www.sashu.com download the full article, https://www.sashu.com Sashu. Com. Download the full article, https://m, Sashu. Com. Chapter 1052. Wei Wei Bai hesitated for a moment. Are you really going to kill Fu Beija? Li Xinghe was silent. He looked at her deeply and finally said, if I want to kill him, will you be willing? This question was unreasonable. But it was very important to Li Xinghe. Because her answer would affect whether she liked Fu Beija or not. He didn't mind that she was married before. But he cared very much if she gave her heart to Fu Beija. Wei Wei Bai didn't answer. She even looked a little dazed. Li Xinghe sighed. He felt that this was already a very good answer. She still didn't know her own feelings. This meant that he still had a chance. Li Xinghe pulled her and stuffed her into the car. Hurry up and leave. Wei Wei Bai saw that there was only one driver. She didn't go to the back seat. Instead, she went directly to the front passenger seat. Li Xinghe felt that it was strange, but he didn't think too much about it. After Wei Wei Bai got into the car, she suddenly looked up at him. Li Xinghe, I've thought it through. I don't want Fu Beija to be killed by you. No matter what reason we have, since we're married, I won't abandon him. Her words were like a sharp knife stabbing into his heart. Li Xinghe's face turned pale. Even the waxy yellow paint couldn't hide his discomfort. He gritted his teeth, but you can't do anything. Fu Beija will die soon. He won't be able to escape this assassination. After saying that, Li Xinghe turned around and shouted, increase the firepower, kill him for me. His voice trembled as he roared. It sounded like he was extremely sad. Wei Wei Bai took out a gun and immediately pointed it at the driver's head. Get out of here, she said viciously. Li Xinghe was shocked and immediately turned around, but he saw Wei Wei Bai with a white face, holding a gun, and her eyes were cold. He had never seen her like this before. He had seen her most resolute when she had jumped off the train. At that time, she had been so beautiful. But now, she seemed to be glowing. Her eyes were cold, but the way she held the gun was beautiful. Li Xinghe felt angry, but he couldn't do anything to her. He said, Wei Wei, don't go back to save him. The driver won't get out of the car even if you kill him. Wei Wei Bai sneered, then beat him to death. She did not have the time to waste here. If Fu Beija died, her mission would be over. How could side quests get in the way of main quests? Did he want to die? She knocked the driver's head hard with the gun in her hand. Then, she grabbed the bloody driver with one hand, opened the door, and kicked the driver out. She held the gun and quickly sat in the driver's seat. Li Xinghe was stunned by her nimble movements. He had always thought that Wei Wei Bai was a woman raised in a boudoir. Even if she wasn't a Chinese daughter flower, she was still a Chinese rose flower, cold but still gentle. But today, she was like a tyrant bandit. Li Xinghe advised, Wei Wei, you don't know how to drive, get out. If it wasn't for the fact that she was afraid of future side quests, she really wanted to roll her eyes at Li Xinghe. Wei Wei Bai couldn't help but sneer, scram, Li Xinghe. As she spoke, she put her hand on the steering wheel and stepped on the accelerator. Li Xinghe didn't believe that she knew how to drive. Even if he saw her move nimbly, he didn't believe that she would run him over. Suddenly, the car made an ear-piercing rumbling sound. Like a yak, it rushed directly towards Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe was stunned for a moment, but his body had already instinctively thrown to the side. He rolled into the mud, and Bai Weiwei sped past him in the car. Crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here, / crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here. Crossover system, my idol, come here. Chapter 1053. Li Xinghe sat in the pit in a daze, like he was driving a rickshaw. He suddenly said, "Fu Beijia, you've led Wei Wei astray." She was clearly such a gentle and beautiful girl, but she suddenly became so violent. It must have been that violent soldier who led her astray. Wei Wei Bai drove the car. When she rushed over, she just happened to be in the middle of the fight between the two groups of people. Bullets flew through the window and she leaned over the steering wheel, shattering all the glass on her body. Wei Wei Bai gritted her teeth and endured. She turned the steering wheel and stepped on the gas pedal to crash into the restaurant's door. She hoped that Fu Beijia would dodge quickly, otherwise it would be an injustice if he was killed by her. The car hit the counter and stopped. Wei Wei Bai was shocked by the impact and she almost spat out blood. Then she opened the door and saw Fu Beijia looking at her in disbelief. Wei Wei Bai endured the pain and shouted, "Come up, Fu Beijia." Fu Beijia's angry face showed a bit of emotion. He gritted his teeth and said, "Wei Wei Bai, you're simply too stupid. She actually dared to come here. Didn't he tell her to run? Why did she come back? A woman seeking death." He didn't know what kind of emotion his heart was feeling. When Fu Beijia saw her, he just wanted to vent his discomfort. Or it could be called being moved. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 65. Wei Wei Bai's little face had a kind of crystal-like white and her black eyes had a cold light. "If you want to die, then continue to curse me." Her appearance was simply despicable. But it was very beautiful. Fu Beijia admitted for the first time that a woman's beauty could actually kill. He suddenly rushed into the car. Before the door was closed, Wei Wei Bai quickly drove the car backwards and then rushed out. A hail of bullets rained down, riddling the car with holes. When Wei Wei Bai rushed out, she felt a pain in her arm. The bullet had brushed past her flesh. She endured the pain and didn't make a sound. She stepped on the accelerator and fled. After reloading, Fu Beijia stuck his head out of the window and killed several assassins who were chasing after him. The car drove all the way to Fu Beijia's practice area. This place, which was filled with guns and sentries, was Fu Beijia's base camp. As soon as she stopped the car, the sentries rushed over. The assassins didn't dare to chase after him either. Instead, they fled in all directions. Fu Beijia ran out of ammunition. He let out a sigh of relief and turned to look at Wei Wei Bai. But what he saw was a scene that made his heart and soul shatter. Wei Wei Bai lay limply on the steering wheel. The blood on her arm had soaked her clothes and was dripping down the car. She frowned. Her small face was pale and her whole body was trembling. Fu Beijia's body froze for a second. He even held his breath. He had seen too many dead people. He would never be moved by a dead person. This was the first time he felt such a tidal wave of panic that completely drowned him. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai groaned in pain. The moan woke Fu Beijia up with a start. She wasn't dead yet. Fu Beijia's eyes were red. He immediately got out of the car and quickly opened the door. He carefully carried Wei Wei Bai out and shouted to the bodyguards, "Call the doctor." The doctor came and was relieved after seeing her. "It's just a superficial wound. The bullet didn't stay in the body. But there's too much blood. You need a blood transfusion to suture it." Fu Beijia immediately said, "Stop the bleeding first. Let's go to the hospital." It was not safe for these operations here. There was an operating theater in the hospital. A clean operating theater would reduce the chances of the patient getting infected. Chapter 1054. He hurriedly carried the bandaged Wei Wei Bai to the hospital. Along the way, Wei Wei Bai curled up in his arms and trembled non-stop. "Fu Beijia, I'm cold." Fu Beija felt as if his chest was being hammered by a huge rock. His lips trembled as he wrapped his coat tightly around her. "You're not cold. I'm hugging you." His heart ached. He was a big man with rough skin and thick flesh. How could the bullet be so blind as to hit by Wei Wei? Why didn't he hit him? Her body was so petite and weak. How could she withstand being hit by a bullet? A woman's body was fundamentally different from a man's. Their physiques were even more different. When he was hit by a bullet, he was still alive and kicking even after a few days. But a woman was hit by a bullet and could die at any time. Even if she was saved, her body would be weak and it might even leave behind a permanent illness. Fu Beija was extremely anxious. When they arrived at the hospital, Wei Wei Bai was sent to the operating theater. The doctor said, "There's not enough blood. We need to go to the next city to get more." Fu Beija frowned. "I brought dozens of soldiers. Check their blood type and draw my soldiers directly." The doctor did not dare to offend him and immediately nodded. "Okay, let them line up first. I'll check their blood type." Fu Beija stretched out his arm. "Check mine first." The doctor hesitated for a moment. Fu Beija was already furious. "Hurry up, or I'll tear down your hospital and hang you up as a target." The doctor was almost scared to tears by his bully look. He immediately checked Fu Beija's blood type and found that it was the same as Wei Wei Bai's. Blood could be transfused. Fu Beija immediately heaved a sigh of relief. When he was transfusing blood for Wei Wei Bai, he sat by the side and stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai lying on the hospital bed with a pale face. Her body was petite, and even though she was lying on the bed, she still couldn't occupy the small single bed. Fu Beija watched as his blood slowly entered her body. His chest felt suffocated. He thought of how Wei Wei Bai had rushed into the restaurant in her car. Did he want to die? She was always giving him surprises. She actually knew how to drive and even came back to save him. When the surgery was completed, the doctor announced that the patient was safe. Fu Beija, who had been sitting at the side, finally let out a sigh of relief. However, he was unable to let out the discomfort in his chest. Fu Beija held her hand. It was soft and cold. He said softly, "Didn't you dislike me? If I die, shouldn't you be rejoicing that you're free from this blind marriage? Why did you save me?" Wasn't he also testing her all this time? There were all kinds of teasing and rudeness, all kinds of shameless approaches and threats. He just wanted to get back at them. To enter the school, she insisted on marrying him despite his bullets. When he was being ridiculed by the whole city, he couldn't help but play tricks on her whenever he saw her, making her regret marrying him. He was so petty and unreasonable. "Aren't you forcing me to repay you with my body?" Fu Beija hooked her finger and said softly, "You saved me. I have nothing to repay you with. Only this body is heavy enough to warm your bed." At this point, Fu Beija finally knew how to smile embarrassedly. After smiling, he looked up and bumped into a pair of black and pure eyes. Wei Wei Bai woke up. She frowned and looked at the ceiling in a daze. Fu Beija was surprised and happy at the same time. He said, "You're awake. Do you still feel uncomfortable?" Wei Wei Bai turned her head to look at him with difficulty. The corners of her mouth twitched, and she was indescribably awkward. She was so awkward that she was about to cry. Chapter 1055. The small mission above her head finally appeared. It was so strange that she wanted to bang her head against the wall. Childhood Sweetheart Heartwarming mission activated. Childhood Sweetheart is sad and desperate because of your lack of freedom in marriage. Childhood Sweetheart, please use a reasonable reason to request a divorce. Countdown of 10 minutes. Forget about asking for a divorce. What reasonable reason? What is a reasonable reason? Is not a reasonable reason if I don't love you. She thought about it for a while and finally tried to complete the mission. Bai Weiwei opened her mouth, her eyebrows tinged with worry. Fu Beijia, I have something to say to you. Fu Beijia immediately held her hand tightly. What do you need? Do you need to go to the toilet or are you thirsty? Bai Weiwei was choked by his words, and the emotions she had been brewing disappeared. She took a long time before she looked down. I saved you. You owe me a life, right? Fu Beijia laughed softly. Is this why you are in such a hurry to talk? I do owe you a life. Weiwei Bai turned to look at him with a calm expression. Do you know how our marriage came about? Fu Beijia was silent. He really did not ask because at that time, he did not care about this marriage at all. He had been thinking about when he could break off the engagement. Weiwei Bai smiled. That's true. That happened so long ago. Even I heard it from my grandmother. That year, your grandfather saved my father's life. That's why our families are so close. Later on, we decided on our marriage. Fu Beijia's expression became gentler. Isn't this our fate? We were supposed to be together. That's why we had this engagement. Weiwei Bai just looked at him. Her eyes were calm and had a hint of worry. Finally, she said, before my grandmother died, she held my hand tightly and asked me to go to your house to repay her kindness. That's why I have to marry you, Fu Beijia. Fu Beijia repeated, repay a favor. She wanted to enter his house even if she had to die, not just to abide by the marriage contract. It was because she wanted to repay a debt of gratitude. Weiwei Bai continued, she also made me swear that if I broke off the engagement, I would die a horrible death. Fu Beijia's expression changed, ruthlessness crept into his eyes as he fiercely said, how could she make you swear such a poisonous oath, that old B*TCH? Weiwei Bai frowned. Don't talk nonsense about my elders. Fu Beijia, you don't understand the thoughts of the older generation. You should return the favor and abide by the engagement. Fu Beijia tugged at his collar uncomfortably and sneered, I don't understand these things. I only know how wronged you are. Wasn't she being forced to marry him? What kind of mentality did she have at that time to marry him? And on their wedding day, he still treated her that way. His heart was filled with bitterness and pity, which simply made him restless. Weiwei Bai stared at him in a daze for a while before giving a bitter smile, I am wronged, very wronged. Fu Beijia's eyes became wet. He pursed his lips in silence for a while before saying, I won't let you feel wronged in the future. His heartache came without warning. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 68. Weiwei Bai was silent for a while. Her eyes were filled with tears as she finally said, Fu Beijia, can we divorce? Look, I've already paid you with my life, then I can redeem my father's life. I know that you feel wronged and I don't want to delay you, but I don't want to die a horrible death. Fu Beijia couldn't understand her words for a while. But looking at her, her beautiful eyes were filled with grievance, I'm not breaking the contract. I've already saved you, so my grandmother won't let the oath come true. He should be angry. She didn't want him and wanted a divorce. But why was it that when he saw her crying eyes, his heart was filled with pain? Fu Beijia suddenly bent down and kissed her lips. He said in a low voice, Weiwei, you saved me, so I'm willing to suffer for you for a lifetime. Weiwei Bai, but I don't want to suffer for a lifetime. She didn't say this as she saw the small quest notification. The favorability notification also came. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 70. Weiwei Bai smiled before closing her eyes in exhaustion and falling asleep. Transmigration system, male god, come here. 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 Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1056. Fu Beija sat beside her in a daze and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was still smiling bitterly even though she was in deep sleep. He finally knew why she wanted to marry him even at the cost of her life. He thought that Wei Wei Bai was just pedantic and old-fashioned. She didn't want to bear the burden of breaking off the engagement and would rather have a marriage without feelings. He didn't expect that her courage was forced by the old-fashioned and pedantic elders in her family. He had seen examples of women being forced to death by their elders in the family. There were even places where the customs were particularly feudal. If a woman didn't marry according to the wishes of her parents, she would be directly tied to the bridal sedan chair. More often than not, she was brainwashed to do whatever her parents told her to do. He didn't expect that Wei Wei Bai was also one of the victims. She actually didn't want to marry him. Just like him, he didn't like a woman who he had never met. It was rare for Fu Beija to empathize with another person's life. When she first entered the family, she was in despair. She was forced to make a vow, but when she was about to enter the family, she was greeted by his bullets. Even so, when he was assassinated, she still risked her life to drive into the restaurant to save him. Driving, how did she know how to drive? Fu Beija thought about it and felt that the Bai family had some family background before they fell. Even if they were really in dire straits, they wouldn't have fallen to the bottom. Perhaps the elders in the family taught her how to drive. Fu Beija didn't think too much about it, especially when Wei Wei Bai was still lying on the hospital bed. A bodyguard came over and whispered, "Young Marshal, we caught a few assassins." Fu Beija revealed a trace of murderous intent and his eyes were extremely cold. "Force a confession out of them first. Don't kill them. I'll go personally when I'm free." This time, the assassination was fierce. It must be the group of people in the south. Li Xinghe was definitely involved. Last time, a bullet couldn't kill him. This time, he wouldn't give up until he left Li Xinghe's body in the north. Wei Wei Bai's wound needed to be observed in the hospital. Fu Beija accompanied her as she busied herself. He even asked someone to make chicken soup and brought it over. Then, he fed it to Wei Wei Bai. "Your hand is injured, so you can't move. I'll be your hand for the time being." Fu Beija said it calmly. Even the corny words did not sound corny. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips and didn't say anything. She just looked straight at him, as if she was observing his reaction. Of course, Fu Beija knew what she was thinking. He scooped a spoonful of chicken soup and said gently, "Drink it." Looking at the chicken soup that was about to reach her mouth, she frowned. Fu Beija teased, "How many people want my gentleness? I'm giving you some of my gentleness. Are you happy?" This gentleness was something that he had painstakingly squeezed out. After all, he had no experience in coaxing people. She didn't know how a man could be considered gentle and courteous to the girl he liked. He had never been a gentleman. If he could solve it crudely, he would never drag it out. It was rare for him to be so careful when it came to relationships. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything, but she gently held the spoon and drank the chicken soup. It was a cute action. Fu Beija continued to feed her. "Eat more. You're too skinny. You can't be too skinny. Otherwise, you won't be able to resist hunger and your body won't be well." Wei Wei Bai looked at him lightly and asked in a low voice, "Have you considered it?" Fu Beija laughed, "You still remember what you said just now? You've already entered my house and you still want to walk out. I've said it before, why don't you not enter my house? Once you enter my house, you won't be able to leave. Wei Wei Bai was a little anxious. Didn't you say that we can still get a divorce? Transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read the at https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://www.sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here and read at https://sashu.com/transmigration system, my Adonis, come over here. Chapter 1057. Fu Beija thought of the free marriage notice that was posted all over the city. He really wanted to get someone to tear it down. Fortunately, he was thick-skinned and did not feel that going back on his words was a bad thing. Yes, I can get a divorce, but I won't. Wei Wei Bai was puzzled. Why? You don't like me very much. The gentleness on Fu Beija's face gradually disappeared. Why do you think so? At first, I didn't like you. After all, how much can I have feelings for a woman I haven't met before? But it's different now. Wei Wei Bai, how is it different? Fu Beija smiled, leaned over and quickly kissed her on the lips. Wei Wei Bai immediately covered her mouth and stared at him with a frown. Fu Beija really liked this shy look of hers. That's the difference. I'm not casual with women, but I'm casual with you. Isn't it because I like you? He was not shy. If he liked her, he liked her. There was nothing that could not be said. He was so annoyed by those scholars and poets. They did not say anything when they liked someone, but they were so shy and wrote love letters. It was so sour. He was even more disgusted by those men who hid their feelings in their hearts. They were like a little daughter-in-law, making people laugh. If he, Fu Beija, liked a woman, he would announce it out loud. I like you. How can I feel that being with you is torture? Wei Wei Bai's face was red. There were traces of tears in her black eyes, which were sparkling and clear. Fu Beija was a little embarrassed when she looked at him. He said, Okay, I know you are very surprised. Don't mention divorce in the future. I'm a very good partner. I don't go out and fool around. I'm not picky about my food. I can sleep on the floor. Also, I'm hardworking and eager to learn. You can't find anyone like me in 10 miles. You should be happy that you married a good man who can let you eat and dress well. He was very practical. Although he seemed a little unreliable on normal days. But he knew how good he was. He was so good, and he liked her. She would definitely be happy for the rest of her life. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. Was this another type of narcissism? She asked hesitantly, Do you really like me? Fu Beija said calmly, Yes, I like it. His tone was flat, as if he was saying that the weather was good. Wei Wei Bai was about to say something when he stuffed a spoonful of soup into her mouth. All right, don't ask so many questions. What are you thinking about every day with that little head of yours? If I really want to divorce you, I have plenty of ways. Why do I need you to rack your brains? Eat and don't talk. Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to say anything. This was because Fu Beija was feeding her and did not give her a chance to nag. The atmosphere between the two of them was unusually calm, with a hint of sweetness. However, Fu Beija deliberately ignored Wei Wei Bai's intentions. For example, she didn't like him very much. Also, she actually wanted a divorce. She was still a little old-fashioned and traditional, so she would still stay by his side even if he didn't agree to the divorce. Therefore, Fu Beijia was not very worried about this problem. It was a lifetime, so she would definitely like him. Otherwise, who else could she like? Wei Wei Bai stayed in the hospital for a few days. When she felt better, she was discharged. On the day she was discharged, Fu Beijia drove her back to the old mansion. When they arrived at the old mansion, they found that there were already a few more cars in front of the old mansion. They were all Fu Beijia's men. "I'm here to pack your things." Wei Wei Bai looked at him strangely. "What are you packing?" Fu Beijia raised his eyebrows and looked at her. "Of course they're your things. You'll live with me in the future. You don't have to come back. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here, download the full text. Transmigration system, Adonis, come here, next time you open the bookshelf, you'll see it. If you like, Transmigration system, Adonis, come here. Chapter 1058. Before Wei Wei Bai could answer, Chen Ru had already rushed out with a group of people. "Wei Wei, I heard that you're going to the city." The old mansion was located in the suburbs, in the center of the city where Fu Beijia lived. Chen Ru's face was cold, and she didn't put on an amiable expression. She still wanted Wei Wei Bai to stay in the old mansion so that Fu Beijia could go home. She thought that Wei Wei Bai was useless and couldn't keep Fu Beijia. In the end, unexpectedly, Fu Beijia was really tempted. Chen Ru really wanted to look up and laugh. The people that she tried so hard to arrange could actually win over Fu Beijia. As long as Wei Wei Bai was in the old mansion, Fu Beijia would definitely come back. But today, a group of soldiers rushed in and said that they wanted to pack up Wei Wei Bai's things and live in the city. So was she drawing water with a bamboo basket? Wei Wei Bai just got out of the car and didn't say anything when she saw Chen Ru's expression. Fu Beijia glanced at her indifferently, then reached out and grabbed Wei Wei Bai's shoulder, ignoring Chen Ru, and walked into the mansion. There was even some hostility in his eyes. It was as if Chen Ru was an enemy who came to steal Wei Wei Bai. Fu Beijia said to Wei Wei Bai while walking, "Chen Ru is not a good person, don't believe her. Although I'm not a good person, I'm definitely sincere to you." Sincerity with 70 favorability. It was indeed very high for a man. Although 70 wasn't unique. Wei Wei Bai said, "Do you need to move out in such a hurry?" This was similar to kidnapping. Fu Beijia came to the front hall, then pulled her to sit down and asked someone to serve tea. He sneered, "There are so many dirty things in this mansion, I don't want you to stay here." Wei Wei Bai actually felt that moving out would be better for the strategy. Just as she was about to answer, a small mission appeared above her head. "Please return to your room, what was up with Xiao Sao's arrow?" Was this a map to guide her back to her room? Wei Wei Bai didn't have a good impression of the cute mission sent by the main system at all. What a crazy big boss. The most annoying main system in history. Bai Wei Wei got up and said to Fu Beijia, "You let your soldiers come and move things. Don't think about how many private things a girl has, how can you show them?" Fu Beijia didn't think so much. After all, they could just move the entire wardrobe away. The entire dressing table was also taken away. How could she really let those rough men handle her things? But Wei Wei Bai was not reassured. Wei Wei Bai Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai Lu Wei Wei. Wei 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 Wei, Wei 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 Wei. Wei 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 Wei. Wei 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 Wei. He was already very happy. Wei Wei Bai nodded and turned to leave. The arrow followed her and kept urging her to return to her room. Suddenly, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Fu Beijia following her. Bai Wei Wei stopped in her tracks and looked at him calmly. Fu Beijia didn't feel embarrassed at all. "I feel that I should go and help. Those maidservants are not clean. I definitely won't steal your things." Wei Wei Bai looked at him suspiciously. She looked like she was looking at a perverted stalker. Fu Beijia was a little embarrassed when she saw that. Wei Wei Bai didn't care and continued to walk forward. Do as you wish. Fu Beijia immediately followed her. Her arm hadn't recovered yet, so she couldn't use too much strength to avoid reopening the wound. Fu Beijia was really worried about her and didn't want to see what her personal items looked like. Chapter 1059. Wei Wei Bai followed the arrow and returned to the room. The soldiers had not come in yet. Fu Beijia also stepped into the room. He did not come here often. The decoration of the room was still old-fashioned, but the furnishings were elegant and fresh. The wooden table and chairs were placed by the window. There was a vase on the table. There was a withered branch in the vase. It was bony, cold and elegant. On the dressing table, there were only a few bottles of feminine perfume. It was so little that it was pitiful. Fu Beijia then remembered that Wei Wei Bai did not wear much jewelry. She did not have a good life. Fu Beijia's heart clenched. Wei Wei Bai did not pay attention to Fu Beijia. She took a bag and put the things on the dressing table into it. Then she went to the wardrobe as if nothing had happened. The small task on top of her head had become. Please gently open the wardrobe. There is a surprise package in the wardrobe. What was in the wardrobe? It should be a surprise package. The main system had never given her a reliable surprise before. Wei Wei Bai became vigilant. She suddenly realized that she could not open the wardrobe. What if something inhuman came out of it? What if Fu Beijia saw it? Wei Wei Bai pondered for a moment and suddenly turned to look at Fu Beijia. Fu Beijia stood by the table. The dried twigs accentuated his cold and hard face, making him look even more handsome. He was playing with a lighter leisurely. He was still holding a cigarette in his hand, but he did not light it. Why, you're done. Fu Beijia looked at her and could not help but reveal a smile. Wei Wei Bai shook her head. I just feel that I can't finish today. Moreover, my wound has not healed, and I can't sleep on the bed. If I go with you today, I will not be able to sleep or rest for several nights. Fu Beijia's expression did not change, but his eyes darkened. He thought for a moment, then shook his head. I don't feel at ease leaving you here. Wei Wei Bai smiled. Why? Are you afraid that I'll be eaten up by this place? I've been here for a long time and I'm fine. Fu Beijia looked at her bright and beautiful smile, and his eyes softened a little. He lit the cigarette and said in a low voice, It's different. You had no value in the past, but now you do. Wei Wei Bai looked a little confused, as if she didn't understand what his value was. Fu Beijia also knew that she did not understand. After all, she had just married into the family not long ago. He said calmly, My father is not a reliable person. He likes that woman, Chen Ru, so he married her. That woman is also very powerful. She took advantage of the fact that I was fighting on the battlefield to win over the elders of the Fu family and put pressure on me. Wei Wei Bai, put pressure on you. Fu Beijia nodded. Yes, because my father happened to be seriously ill, Chen Ru took care of him every day. After serving my father well, she got half of a military order. This military order is very powerful, and it can mobilize half of the soldiers in my family. This was incredible. The soldiers of the Fu family had been led by General Fu and Fu Beijia for 2 generations. Almost all of them were brave and good at war, and all of them were elite soldiers. This was the foundation of Fu Beijia's standing in this chaotic era, and was able to compete with the South. Fu Beijia saw Wei Wei Bai frown and knew that she had immediately figured out the power of the military order. What a smart girl. Fu Beijia said with a smile, Don't be afraid, she can't use this military order. My father has a will that says that she can only use it if she meets some conditions. Wei Wei Bai asked curiously, what conditions? Fu Beige's voice turned cold. Children. Wei Wei Bai repeated doubtfully, children. Chapter 1060. Fu Beige said, if Chen Ru had a son, she would be able to use it. But she didn't, and my father didn't make it very clear in his will. So, Chen Ru convinced the elders that as long as there is a new child in the Fu family, even if it's a grandson, it's fine. The military order was very important. He had never believed that Chen Ru could use it. Because Chen Ru didn't leave behind a child, and his father died too soon. She didn't have time to cheat on Marshal Fu and give birth to a fake one. The will said that if Chen Ru had a successor of the Fu family, she could use it. This military order was not for her. It was for her descendants. Marshal Fu's original intention was to protect her child. After all, Marshal Fu thought that he was in good health. If Chen Ru was pregnant, he would die. Then Chen Ru and his child would be at risk. But unexpectedly, Marshal Fu died after the will was made. Chen Ru didn't have a child, so the military order was useless. That was why Chen Ru turned her attention to Fu Beige. Fu Beige stared at Wei Wei Bai's belly. You are Chen Ru, the woman acknowledged by the elders of the Fu family. They were so eager to let you in because they wanted you to give birth to my child. Wei Wei Bai was confused by his family's entanglement. She asked curiously, even if we have a child, what does it have to do with Chen Ru? Fu Beige smiled. Idiot, you have my child. Chen Ru is my stepmother, so the child in your belly is her grandson. When the child is born, she can take it away from you, and then the will can be used. Who said that only sons had the right to inherit? Grandchildren also had rights. And grandchildren were easier to control. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little ugly. She instinctively reached out to cover her belly. She can't take my child away. I won't let her succeed. Fu Beige looked at her belly and his eyes softened. Her purpose is to kill me. As long as you have a child, I have no value. Then, when you give birth, they will take the opportunity to take away your child and kill you. Wei Wei Bai said coldly, she dares. These words were cold and domineering. Fu Beige actually felt excited and didn't feel that what she said was unladylike. His smile deepened. She dares, but she can't beat me. I'll wait for her to court death a few more times, then I'll deal with her with interest. Other women were completely uninterested in what he was saying. They were only interested in a life of luxury, clothes and jewelry. Only Wei Wei Bai understood him. She could follow his thoughts no matter what he said. It was easy to find a woman who was beautiful and gentle. But a girl who understood him, was as courageous as him, and was even more courageous than him. It was a treasure. It was something that could only be discovered but not sought. The diamond hidden in the yellow sand shone brightly. And this ray of light was seen by him. Fu Beige could only feel his heart beating faster and his blood boiling. After meeting her, he felt that the rest of the female fans were just female fans. Only she was his confidant. Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips, her expression cold. Her black eyes were deep, and she snorted coldly. Stupid evil woman, do you think I'm easy to bully? If I have a child, I won't let anyone hurt him. You don't have to worry about me, I'm not the kind of person who doesn't fight back when bullied. He believed her words. She held a grudge. He knew that if it wasn't for the marriage contract, she might have wanted to take revenge on him for those few shots back then. He really liked this kind of Wei Wei Bai. Chapter 1061. Wei Wei Bai turned around and put the bag on the chair. Her hair was a little loose, but she didn't think much of it. She took out the hairpin and her black hair fell down. It was beautiful and smooth as it draped over her back, making her look even more slender. Wei Wei Bai lowered her head and didn't notice Fu Beija behind her. Her voice softened. You can go back first, Fu Beija. I want to rest. Just as she finished speaking, the man behind her had already leaned over. He still had the smell of cigarettes on him, mixed with the coldness of late autumn, and had a chilling sense of invasion. He pressed his face against her hair and said in a hoarse voice, "Is there a wife who chases her husband out? Tonight, I'll sleep here with you." If she couldn't hear the beastly meaning in his words, then she would have wasted her time transmigrating through so many worlds. Without a substitute sticker, she refused to sell her body. Just one world was enough to make her scared. She would rather lose some favorability points than let this beast have his way. Wei Wei Bai turned around and looked at him coldly. I'm already injured, and you're still making it difficult for me to sleep. Fu Beija looked at her innocently and said in a low voice, I'll sleep on the floor. I don't choose a place. She would be a fool to believe him. Wei Wei Bai looked up and suddenly found that the mission had changed. The host ignored the small hint of my love and refused to open the wardrobe. The mission has been upgraded. Please open the wardrobe within 1 minute. Did the wardrobe offend the system? Why did it keep making her open the wardrobe? Did it want her to change clothes on the spot for Fu Beija to see? Bai Weiwei casually pushed Fu Beija away. Come on, you go away from me. For the sake of saving you, can't you let me have some peace of mind? Fu Beija saw her struggle and was afraid that something would happen to the wound on her arm, so he obediently retreated. She coughed softly, and Fu Beija immediately turned around to get some water. Wei Wei Bai casually opened the wardrobe when he poured the water with his back to her. The arrow on the wardrobe changed. Congratulations, host, for capturing a little bamboo horse. Under the arrowhead, Li Xinghe's handsome face with a hint of worry appeared. He curled up his body and squatted obediently in her closet. Li Xinghe saw her open the closet. His eyes were a little touched, but he did not dare to make a sound. Wei Wei Bai, then she slowly closed the wardrobe and locked Li Xinghe up again. Oh, my God. Hack the main system to death. She would pay for all the electricity. What was the point of hiding a man in the closet? What a cuckold. Wei Wei Bai had just closed the wardrobe when Fu Beija turned around and walked in front of her with a glass of water in his hand. Drink some water. She took it absent-mindedly and saw that the mission had changed again. The mission of discovering a little bamboo horse has been completed. Little childhood sweetheart, please successfully send the little bamboo horse to the south within 12 hours. Li Xinghe's assassination had failed. He was really destined to be the second male lead. Even after 2 successful assassination attempts, he still could not do anything to Fu Beija. She, this childhood sweetheart, was doomed. She sent him to the south every day. Was she going to the south? Wei Wei Bai drank the water in one gulp and then put the glass on the table heavily. Fu Beija saw that she was murderous when she drank the water. He smiled and said, Why are you suddenly angry? Are you really angry that I slept here? As he spoke, he reached out to open the wardrobe door. At this moment, his actions turned into a horror film in Wei Wei Bai's eyes. When the husband opened the wardrobe at home, the wife said that she would show him a living person. When the wardrobe was opened, there was a naked man. She was in a better situation. Li Xinghe was not naked yet. Li Xinghe and Fu Beija were mortal enemies. Wei Wei Bai almost sprinted 100 meters and rushed in front of Fu Beija. She reached out to grab his collar and pulled his head back. In fact, his hand had already opened the wardrobe door. Li Xinghe's complicated expression was revealed. Wei Wei Bai's expression was even more complicated than his. She grabbed Fu Beija's collar tightly and said without thinking, Fu Beija, I have something to say to you. Fu Beija did not think so much and said, what do you want to say? Wei Wei Bai's brain stopped working. What could she say? What could she say to distract him? Fu Beija felt a little uncomfortable and wanted to turn his head away. Wei Wei Bai was already shouting in horror, I want to have a child with you. Fu Beija, Li Xinghe, Wei Wei Bai, did she say something that she shouldn't have? // Chapter 1062. Could the automatic reminder give her a sticker automatically? Ding! The automatic reminder reminded you that the sticker cannot be given automatically, but it can remind you to stand upside down if you want to give birth easily. Wei Wei Bai, screw your automatic reminder, you're the one who stands upside down, your whole family will stand upside down and give birth to a bunch of children as punishment. They all couldn't bear to see her doing well. She had no principles because she was forced, not because she was thick-skinned. Wei Wei Bai decided to give up on herself. She glared at Fu Beija fiercely, then reached out and pulled open her collar. Do you want it that much? Under her collar, her fair skin and beautiful collarbones were exposed. Fu Beija heard himself gulping. He nodded loyally. You want to give birth, of course you need my help. Wei Wei Bai looked at him from the corner of her eyes, wanting to see how shameless he could be. Fu Beija did not disappoint, and said something even more shameless. I'll be gentle, it won't hurt at all. After saying that, he lowered his head and was about to bite her flesh. The big bad wolf opened his mouth, wanting to swallow this tender piece of tofu. However, he suddenly sniffed the smell of blood. He suddenly looked up, only to see that Wei Wei Bai's face was slightly pale, and her pink lips were pursed, looking a little pitiful. Fu Beija lowered his head to look, and his pupils shrank. The wound on her arm had actually split open. What happened? It had healed well, so why did it split open? Fu Beija immediately lost all thoughts. He held her arm with heartache, frowning. Why did it split open? Wei Wei Bai said unbearably, I bumped into it when I was playing with you just now. When did she bump into it? Could it be that when he pushed her just now, she accidentally bumped into the wardrobe? He clearly did not have much strength, and he was very careful. He did not expect that her healing ability was so bad. Fu Beija anxiously pressed her to sit on a chair and then called for the people outside to bring in the first aid kit. He lifted her sleeve and saw that the bandage was indeed soaked in blood. It was a heart-wrenching pain. Her wound had finally healed, but because of his playfulness, it had been bruised. Girls were different from stinky men. Even a little bit of strength would hurt her. This was the first time Fu Beija blamed himself so much. He opened the medicine box and rolled her sleeves up to her arms. He then removed her bandages and saw that her wound was bleeding. Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. Seeing him seriously lowering his head, he cleaned her wound, applied medicine, and then put a new bandage on her. Fortunately, it's only a small crack, so there's no need to sew it up again. During this time, you're not allowed to touch water, and you're not allowed to use too much force. If you want to do anything, ask the servants to help. His hand was so warm that it burned her arm. The rough calluses of the spear rubbed against her skin, giving her a numb and rough feeling. Wei Wei Bai flinched. Fu Beija immediately looked at her worriedly. Does it hurt? Wei Wei Bai raised the corner of her mouth. It doesn't hurt. She had purposely made the wound open just to avoid selling her body. In the end, he was too anxious. This man was actually not that much of a beast. Fu Beija looked straight at her smile and suddenly leaned over to steal a kiss. Wei Wei Bai was at a loss for a moment and stared at him. He smiled innocently. Your smile is so beautiful. I've been seduced. Let's postpone the matter of having a child until your wound is healed. No matter how anxious I am, I won't hurt you. Wei Wei Bai's expression was indifferent, but there was a trace of gentleness and confusion. The. Chapter 1063. She seemed to be moved. The delicate girl was like a magnolia flower, sitting in front of him and looking at him with a pair of pure black eyes. This feeling was really fresh. He had never experienced such a beautiful and quiet relationship before. Were all girls like this? Fu Beija thought for a moment and rejected it. No, only Wei Wei Bai was like this. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 75. After Fu Beija finished bandaging her, he had someone clean up the room next door. He said, "You're right not to let me sleep on the floor in your room. I'm afraid that I'll turn into a wolf and eat you in the middle of the night, so I'll live next door." Wei Wei Bai was still thinking about the man in the wardrobe. She couldn't help urging, "No one has lived next door for a long time, it's not comfortable. You should go back to the city." Fu Beija didn't listen to her at all. "Your hand is injured like this, I have to take care of you. Otherwise, am I still your man?" Wei Wei Bai was speechless. It was too obvious that something was wrong. In fact, it was already a miracle that Li Xinghe could stay in the wardrobe and not be discovered by Fu Beija, who was as vigilant as a wolf. Maybe even Fu Beija didn't think of it. Li Xinghe would hide in her room. Plus, most of his attention was on her, so he didn't pay attention to the wardrobe. Wei Wei Bai casually looked at the wardrobe and then lowered her eyes. "All right, do whatever you want." Fu Beija saw her like this. Could it be that she was shy? Although she was married to him, she was still a young girl. They didn't spend much time together. No matter how bold she was still from a traditional family. She would definitely be reserved when it came to matters between men and women. Even though he appeared to be in a hurry, he was still bashful deep down. Especially when he thought about the bed, his nose became hot and his face turned red. Wei Wei Bai suddenly felt that something was wrong. She stared at Fu Beija's face. "Why is it so red?" Fu Beija suddenly stood up and immediately covered his nose. "Then you rest well, call me if you need anything." After saying that, he fled in a hurry. When he ran out of the house, he opened his palm and saw that his nose was bleeding. The bodyguard beside him looked at him in surprise. Fu Beija's face turned even hotter. He glared fiercely at the bodyguards and then ran to the next room to wash up. He had been too angry recently. He had such a little treasure by his side, but he couldn't really touch it. This kind of torture was simply too much. He didn't even dare to play more than a few rounds. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Fu Beija was worried about Wei Wei Bai's wound. He did not know how many days it would take for it to heal. If she recovered quickly, he could have children with her too. Wei Wei Bai saw Fu Beija go out, but she didn't open the wardrobe door. Instead, he opened the door and saw that there were many sentries outside. When Fu Beija arrived, he brought a bunch of soldiers with him. They surrounded the entire mansion. The elders in the mansion were probably going to be angered to death by this. After all, this was simply a blatant threat. Wei Wei Bai glanced at the wardrobe. Li Xinghe was hiding inside. She didn't know how long he could last. After all, the wardrobe wasn't big. As a man, he had been hiding inside it. When it was time to escape, he wouldn't be unable to run far because his legs were numb, right? Wei Wei Bai suddenly thought of something. She immediately walked to the wardrobe and gently opened it. Li Xinghe was leaning against the wardrobe. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but the moment the wardrobe door opened, he immediately opened his eyes. There was a flash of light in his eyes. He also raised the gun in his hand. But when he saw Wei Wei Bai, he quickly put away the gun in his hand. There was a trace of embarrassment on his face. Wei Wei Bai didn't say anything. Instead, she bent down and rummaged around him. She found a set of men's clothes. Chapter 1064. Fu Beijia had opened the wardrobe to look for clothes. When she had moved in, other than her own clothes, half of the wardrobe had belonged to Fu Beijia. Chen Ru had ordered them to be brought over. It was also a way to win him over and announce that they were husband and wife. Fu Beijia also knew that he planned to spend the night here, so he opened the closet to take the clothes. Li Xinghe saw that she did not speak, so he did not make a sound. He just stood there quietly. After she took the clothes out, she gently closed the closet door. Li Xinghe held his breath and released it. He smelled the fragrance she left in the closet. The narrow and dark environment did not seem unbearable. Wei Wei Bai opened the door and saw the guards bowing respectfully to her. She frowned. How was she going to get Li Xinghe out with these people blocking her way? Wei Wei Bai walked to the next room and knocked on the door. Fu Beijia opened the door and saw her. He immediately smiled and took the clothes from her hands. Why didn't you let the servants take it? Your hand is still injured. I was worried that you would go back to the closet to take the clothes. Wei Wei Bai showed a sincere smile. I didn't use much strength. The room is cold. Remember to get someone to burn charcoal for you to warm you up at night. Fu Beijia leaned against the door and looked at her smiling face. His heart softened. He reached out and gently touched her face. Her fair skin was delicate and delicate. It was completely different from the roughness of his fingers. Fu Beijia said, I know. I will take care of myself before I can take care of you. He felt strange and happy that she cared about him. Wei Wei Bai looked at him affectionately for a while before saying, Can you withdraw your soldiers further away? I want to wipe my body. I feel uncomfortable with so many men around. Under her enchanting gaze, Fu Beijia nodded blankly. Then, he suddenly woke up. His face was actually a little red. He immediately went out and kicked those soldiers' buttocks a few times. Go, go, go. All of you, stand guard outside. His woman needed to wash up. How could another man be around? Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. She had finally gotten rid of those guards. Then she saw Fu Beijia rushing over with a wooden basin of hot water. Wei Wei Bai had a bad feeling about this. But he said excitedly, Hurry up and wipe yourself. I'll get you some water and change. Wei Wei Bai's face turned red in anger. This guy had only been upright for 3 seconds. Being wretched was his true nature. Fu Beijia saw that she was angry and said with a cheeky smile, I'm just helping, I won't do anything. Bai Weiwei really wanted to give him a butt and kick him out of the room. Fortunately, Fu Beijia did not trust his beastly instincts. After he brought the water in, he asked her to wipe herself. I'll wait outside. I'll keep watch and get you some water. Weiwei Bai was really at her wit's end. She knew that if she did not wipe herself, she would not be able to get rid of Fu Beijia. She could only close the door. But she was still worried and pulled a chair to block the door. Then she opened the wardrobe and took a dress from Li Xinghe. Without even looking at him, Weiwei Bai closed the door again. Li Xinghe blinked. She wanted to wipe herself. His heart immediately started beating like a drum, as if it was going to jump out of his throat. This could not be done. He was in the same room with her. If she wiped herself, wouldn't he be profaning her? Li Xinghe immediately opened the wardrobe door to stop her. But the moment he opened the door, he saw Weiwei Bai squatting down and unbuttoning her collar. With her back facing him, her soft and fair fingers gently stirred the hot water in the basin. In the midst of the steam, she was beautiful and seductive. Li Xinghe stared at her in a daze. Wei Weibai felt that something was wrong. She turned around and saw Li Xinghe's dazed eyes. She lowered her head and looked at her collar. She had only unbuttoned one button and nothing was exposed. What was he looking at? Wei Weibai glared at him fiercely. She could not just sit in the wardrobe and be a clothes hanger. If she came out and Fu Beija saw her, it would be a problem. She immediately rushed over and closed the wardrobe door. Then she pulled a chair over. She leaned against the wardrobe door. She looked at the chair that was against the door. The wardrobe was against the chair. Wei Weibai could not help but squat down. Her husband was outside the door and her man was hidden in the wardrobe. She still had to take off her clothes here. She felt that this plot was getting weirder and weirder. To hell with your side mission. Chapter 1065. Then Bai Weiwei sighed, resigned to her fate. She casually wiped her body with a cloth and wet her hair. Then she changed her clothes, let her hair down, moved the chair in the wardrobe and the chair at the door away before opening the door. Fu Beija was squatting at the door. Of course, he heard the sound of the chair against the door. She guarded against him as if he was a thief. Fu Beija was not angry. After all, he was a bad person and not a good person. It was right for her to guard against him. Even Fu Beija felt that Wei Weibai was smart. She knew that he was a beast and did not give him a chance to be one. Anyway, he suddenly liked someone. Everything about her was right and he liked her. When Fu Beija heard the door open, he turned to look and saw Wei Weibai standing at the door looking at him. Her long black hair was down and she was wearing a white dress. The light of the setting sun shone on her face at the door, making it look beautiful. He stared at her for a few seconds before he got up and walked through the door. He rolled up his sleeves to move the wooden basin. Wei Weibai was a little nervous. Never mind the wardrobe. That wardrobe was poisonous. Fortunately, Fu Beija did not think too much and left after moving the wooden basin. He had evil intentions, but he was worried about Wei Weibai's wound, so he let her go for the time being. After he finished packing up everything, Fu Beija walked up to Wei Weibai calmly and looked at her without saying a word. Wei Weibai looked at him speechlessly. Aren't you going to do something? He could not pretend to be calm for more than 3 seconds before he started to talk glibly again. Wei Weibai leaned against the door, wishing she could get rid of him quickly. Do what? Fu Beija saw that she really did not want to do anything. He felt wronged and suddenly strode forward. He reached out and hugged her waist, pulling her into his arms and kissing her. The kiss was restrained and gentle, but it had a burning passion. He said in a low voice, "You have to thank me for my gentleness." Wei Weibai pushed him away and said with disdain, "Who would ask for a reward for helping his wife carry a basin? You're not gentle, you're stingy." The title of "my wife" was really pleasant to hear. Fu Beija obediently let go of her, not daring to go too far. He smiled and said, "All right, let's eat dinner together and then rest early. I won't do anything to you during this time." He sounded as if he was going to do something to her in the future. Wei Weibai was really afraid of the side mission. She even suppressed the urge to flirt with Fu Beija. She couldn't wait to get late so that Li Xinghe could get out of her closet. The target of the strategy this time. He was not a kind character. Although she wasn't a pervert, she had grown up with blood on her hands. If she was found to be hiding Li Xinghe, she would definitely be punished. That scene would only happen if the favorability was 100. Otherwise, Fu Beija's torture tools would have been used on her. There was no social security, no painkiller, and no system to chat with. It was too miserable. In the past, she thought that it was very unfortunate that she met a system that couldn't let her fly. In the end, what was even more unfortunate was that she didn't even have a system. If the system came back, she wouldn't despise it anymore. It was actually very good. After dinner, she finally got rid of Fu Beija, who was eyeing her covetously. She hurried back to her room. When she opened the closet, she felt that if Li Xinghe was smart, he would have escaped when she and Fu Beija were in the dining room. The guards outside her room were all outside. If he wanted to escape, he had many ways. In the end, when she opened the closet, she saw Li Xinghe looking at her with a pair of bright eyes. Wei Wei Bai's mouth twitched. What a fool. She really wanted to beat this bastard to death. // Chapter 1066. Li Xinghe had been curled up for a long time. His legs were numb, but he did not come out of the wardrobe. It was as if he had become a wardrobe spirit and the wardrobe was his true form. Wei Wei Bai did not have a good attitude towards this side mission. Hurry up and come out. I'll take you to the train station while no one knows. This time, don't come back after you go south. You can't win against Fu Beija. Side missions could not win against the main mission. Accept your fate. Li Xinghe looked at her with a strange expression. Finally, his voice was a little hoarse. Why are you helping me? The person I want to kill is your husband. You even risked your life to save him. It's not that you don't have feelings for him. Wei Wei Bai lowered her voice and said coldly, helping you is a favor. Just remember it. And saving Fu Beija is my duty. After all, he is my husband. Li Xinghe showed a bitter smile. Husband. Then he sighed. I came too late. No. I came too early. I didn't understand love. When love was deep, I missed it. They had known each other since they were young. But they had not been together for a long time. When they met again when they grew up, they missed it. Wei Wei Bai. The target of this side mission was supposed to be warm and sunny. Was there something wrong with it? It was supposed to be a big idiot who groaned and looked up at the starry sky. She fished in her sleeve and pulled out a handkerchief. Then Wei Wei Bai passed the handkerchief to him. Li Xinghe's eyes trembled. He took the handkerchief excitedly. Did she have feelings for him too? So she gave him a keepsake. He took the handkerchief. Why did it feel warm? He opened the handkerchief. A drumstick. Wei Wei Bai stood outside the wardrobe and looked at him coldly. Hurry up and eat. Once you're full, your mind will be clear. If you continue to be sad, I'll have to hold a funeral for you. Was it easy for her to steal a drumstick for him without arousing suspicion? If this side mission kept nagging her, she really had no other way. Li Xinghe held the drumstick and his eyes reddened. He staggered out of the closet and carefully hid the drumstick in front of his chest. He was so touched by her sincerity. Wei Wei Bai watched as he stuffed the drumstick into his chest. After a moment of silence, she quickly walked to the door and quietly opened it. Halfway through, she gently closed it again. No, Fu Beija was in the next room. With his vigilant nature, no one who passed by his door could escape. Wei Wei Bai turned her head and saw Li Xinghe sitting on a chair, staring at her blankly. Wei Wei Bai held her breath. She really wanted to destroy this guy's corpse and shove him into the well. Li Xinghe seemed to have seen enough. He rubbed his feet and stood up. I'll leave then. Wei Wei Bai couldn't wait for him to leave. However, she didn't know if the side mission would be considered completed if she let Li Xinghe leave by himself. The last time, it was also completed when she sent him to the train station. She didn't dare to take the risk and could only look around. Then, she moved a chair to the back window and opened it. Sure enough, there was no one outside. She turned around and said coldly to Li Xinghe, "Hurry up and follow me. There's still the last night train. Once you get on, you'll be safe." Li Xinghe looked at her familiar movements and the way she stepped out of the window with one foot. It was very natural and not pretentious. Li Xinghe followed Wei Wei Bai out of the back window. Then, the two of them sneaked out of the back door. There were even rickshaws in the middle of the night. However, it was expensive. Seeing the two of them sneaking around, she couldn't help but say, "Elope, big brother." Chapter 1067. Li Xinghe was embarrassed, his face was red. "Don't talk nonsense." He unnaturally looked at Wei Wei Bai, but saw that her side profile was cold and unmoved. Li Xinghe also did not dare to look at her too blatantly. After all, looking at a girl too directly would make him look like a hooligan. The rickshaw quickly arrived at the train station. Li Xinghe did not have enough money on him, and refused to let Wei Wei Bai pay, so he secretly gave the driver a watch as the fare. The train was about to leave. Wei Wei Bai was very suspicious, afraid that Fu Beijia, that wolf, would rush over from somewhere. The thrilling experience at the train station left a shadow in her heart. Fortunately, it did not. Wei Wei Bai heaved a sigh of relief. "Hurry up and get on the train, don't go against Fu Beijia anymore." Every time she went against him, she was the one who died. If this happened a few more times, she would be exhausted to death. Li Xinghe had a guilty look. "I can't repay you for dragging you to take such a risk with me, but I will remember your kindness for the rest of my life." He did not dare to say that he liked her. She was married, and if he said that, it would make her feel unjust. He could not let others look down on her. In this era, women were always too harsh. Wei Wei Bai took a few steps back and looked at him calmly. "Hurry up and leave. If you really want to repay my kindness, then don't try to assassinate Fu Beijia anymore. This is my only request to you." Li Xinghe felt sour in his throat. Did she like Fu Beijia that much? His eyes were teary, but in the end, he nodded. "Okay, I won't kill him, I promise you." Let go of his father's murderer. Just because of one sentence from her. But Li Xinghe was not unwilling, because she had saved him twice. She used 2 of his lives in exchange for Fu Beijia's life. Fair enough. The whistle of the train sounded. Li Xinghe knew that he really had to leave. If he did not try to assassinate Fu Beijia again in the future, he would not be able to escape. He would not risk going north again. This might be the last time he would see her. Wei Wei Bai saw that the mission was still not completed. She then looked at Li Xinghe, who was standing there in a daze. Was this side mission clearly trying to kill her? "Why are you still standing there?" She took a few steps forward and pushed him towards the door of the train. "Let's go." His tone sounded like he was chasing away a beggar. Li Xinghe nodded and said solemnly, "See you later." "Wei Wei Bai, who wants to meet a wardrobe spirit like you? Don't come back, please." Li Xinghe finally got on the train. The small mission was completed. Wei Wei Bai was so moved that she immediately turned around and ran away. Fu Beijia was still next door to her. What if that guy found out that she was not there? She would be dead. Li Xinghe stood in the car and saw her sorrowful look, as well as her reluctance to leave while covering her face. Fog. He took out the chicken drumstick that was hidden in his chest and looked at the shiny orange chicken drumstick. It was as if he could see Wei Wei Bai's beautiful face. This was a gift from her to him. He wanted to keep it. Wei Wei Bai secretly entered the old house from the back door. The silence, the dark house, and the monster's huge mouth gave off a frightening feeling of coldness. Wei Wei Bai finally saw that the back window of her room was open. She immediately reached out and climbed up the window. Halfway up, she suddenly woke up. No, when she left, she closed the window. Why was the window open? Wei Wei Bai's lips trembled. She looked up and saw that the room was dark. In the darkness, moonlight shone in. A tall figure was sitting on a chair. Half of his face was gloomy and cold under the moonlight. Chapter 1068. He quietly watched Wei Wei Bai climb up the window. There was an extremely cold, murderous look in his eyes, and there was even a desperate ruthlessness in them. Wei Wei Bai only had one feeling. She was cold. Fu Beige's voice was faint and deep. "You're back. Where did you go?" Wei Wei Bai didn't know whether to go up or run away. She squeezed out a sentence. "I went to the toilet." Fu Beige smiled, but his smile was a little twisted. He whispered softly, "I thought you wouldn't come back." After all, the wealth of the South must be a big temptation for a woman. Wei Wei Bai's hand trembled. Her foot fell from the window again, and her whole body fell out of the window. Fu Beige's tense body immediately jumped up. He rushed to the window in a rage and dragged Wei Wei Bai through the window into the room. Then he threw her onto the bed. In the darkness, his movements were like that of a wild beast hunting its prey. There was no pity, only aggression. He pressed on her shoulder with one hand and pinned her to the bed. He said word by word, "That man is Li Xinghe, isn't he?" Wei Wei Bai pursed her lips tightly. Her face was pale. She whispered, "Fu Beige, calm down." Her tone was fragile and unspeakably pitiful. Fu Beige pulled out an ugly smile. His eyes were so red that they could kill. "Calm down. If I hadn't come to see you because I was worried that your wound would hurt, I wouldn't have known that you ran away with a man." Wei Wei Bai glanced at the favorability rating. It didn't drop. This was even scarier. The deeper the love, the stronger the backlash when betrayed. She muttered, "I didn't run away." Fu Beige glared at her, wishing that he could pierce a hole in her body to see if she was a black-hearted person. Suddenly, he let go of her and took a few steps back. Then he kicked the table away. The loud noise attracted the attention of the guard at the door. "Young Marshal!" Fu Beige angrily roared, "Get lost." He then turned his head and looked at Wei Wei Bai, who was lying on the bed. "I'll give you a chance. Tell me, what did you do just now?" Wei Wei Bai got up and held the bedpost for support. She pursed her lips and looked at him. Under the hazy moonlight, her face looked even paler and more fragile, as if it would scatter with a gust of wind. Fu Beige clenched his fist, loosened it, and clenched it again. In the end, he slammed the table next to him, making a frightening sound. As expected, Wei Wei Bai looked at him in horror. She had always been bold, but she was frightened by him. Fu Beige suppressed his desire to kill. "Speak." Wei Wei Bai finally sighed and said, "He went to see a friend off." Fu Beige laughed awkwardly. "Friend, bring him to me." He opened the door and someone immediately came over with a light. Several soldiers dragged a man over. Wei Wei Bai looked and saw that it was the driver of the rickshaw. As soon as the driver saw Wei Wei Bai, he immediately wailed and howled, "It's her, young Marshal. It has nothing to do with me. She eloped with a man to the station. I was the one who pulled her along, but I didn't know that she was the madam. If I had known, I wouldn't have dared to let her take the carriage." Fu Beige said sarcastically, "Eloped." The driver immediately said in a very experienced manner, "A man and a woman sneaking around. They even ran to the station at night. They must be eloping." Wei Wei Bai really wanted to beat this driver to death. Fu Beige helped her. "Take him away and deal with him." His handsome face had a demonic ruthlessness, so cold that it could kill. The driver screamed as he was dragged away. Fu Beija lowered his eyes and said coldly, "All of you go and guard outside. Don't let even a fly in. Without my orders, no one is to come in." Everyone retreated. Only Wei Wei Bai was left. Fu Beija unhurriedly turned on the light. He saw that her small face was pale as she looked at him expressionlessly. She didn't beg for mercy and didn't speak. There wasn't a trace of guilt or fear towards him. Fu Beija only felt that his heart was slowly being cut into pieces by a knife. His temples were throbbing non-stop. He slowly walked in front of Wei Wei Bai. Afraid that he would strangle her to death, he desperately suppressed his anger. "Do you really think that you can save Li Xinghe?" Wei Wei Bai raised her head. There seemed to be some worry between her eyebrows. Fu Beija only felt that she was worried about Li Xinghe. He shattered her hope with every word, "My people were following you. He saw you and Li Xinghe go to the train station. I didn't let him stop you because I wanted to see if you really wanted to let Li Xinghe go. He laughed twice. Last time at the train station, you were deliberately held hostage by him. Let him go." Fu Beija's hand grabbed her arm. Wei Wei Bai cried out as he grabbed her wound. Fu Beija lowered his head. His voice was ice-cold as his lips kissed her face. His eyes were dark and fierce. "How can you dig out my heart like this? I really hate you, Wei Wei Bai." Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 60. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com//transmigration system, male god, come here and read the full article at https://www.sashu.com. Transmigration system, male god, come here. Transmigration system, male god, come here, comma. Chapter 1069. He had never placed a woman in his heart before. So this betrayal was like digging out his heart. It was so painful that he wanted to kill. Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. The fear in her eyes was replaced by calmness. "You hated me from the start and didn't believe me. If I said that I wouldn't hurt you, would you believe me, Fu Beija?" Her black eyes glowed like tears, but she held them back. Because of the conflict just now, her hair was messy on her fair neck, making her look even more delicate and charming. Fu Beija's fingers were still pinching her wound. Her blood stained his fingers. He should be used to the smell of iron. But smelling it made him want to vomit. Just like how he didn't believe a single word she said. Fu Beija revealed a cold and contemptuous smile. "I hate you. I can't wait to put you in my mouth. You said that you wouldn't hurt me, but you let go of the person who wanted to kill me twice. Bai Weiwei, that man is my biggest enemy. He's the one who planned to assassinate me several times. You clearly know this." Wei Wei Bai was in so much pain that her whole body was trembling. But she gritted her teeth. "You're his enemy. But before this, he and I were friends. Everything has to be done according to first come, first served. I can't watch you kill each other." Now, she couldn't clear her name. Wei Wei Bai decided to stake it all on this one throw. She would fight to the end. Since there was no use in explaining, she had to admit it. She could lose her favorability, but she couldn't ruin her character. Fu Beija's tone was a little strange. "Friends? How long have you been friends?" Wei Wei Bai said in a low voice, "We've known each other since we were 3 or 4 years old. Later on, when my family was in dire straits, his family went south and we lost contact. 3 or 4 years old, lost contact, reunited at a young age. It sounded so romantic. She could even act out a beautiful romantic drama. Fu Beige's heart was sour, his mouth was bitter, and his eyes were full of hatred. So after we met again, you cheated on me and even helped him escape. Do you want me to die so that you can live together with him? He clearly wanted to hang her up and torture her. He took back all his love for her. He didn't need to ask such a stupid question. Because he didn't care, no, he cared to death. Fu Beige clenched his teeth so hard that they were about to bleed. Wei Wei Bai looked at him coldly. Suddenly, she couldn't help but laugh at herself. Do you have friends? Do you have any brothers? Do you have a life and death friend? Fu Beige did not want to answer. He did not even want to talk to her. But he couldn't control his mouth. Yes. On the battlefield, he had brothers, friends, and life and death friends. Wei Wei Bai asked, if something happens to your brother or friend and you need to risk your life to help, will you help? Fu Beige said coldly, I will. Wei Wei Bai raised her face, revealing her delicate chin. Her eyes were firm and calm. I will help too. If he wants to kill you, I will risk my life to save you. This is the relationship between husband and wife. If you want to kill him, I will help him escape. This is the relationship between friends. I am the same as you. We are both loyal. Fu Beige looked at her with red eyes. His expression was twisted and angry. You are loyal to him. Did you talk about hiding in the closet? There is no loyalty between women and men. There is only adultery. You stepped on my face. Do you still want me to praise you? Although Wei Wei Bai's expression was calm, but her heart was like a stormy sea. Everyone knew that she hid a man in the closet. This was a stain that could not be washed away. Wei Wei Bai's expression was perfect. She did not show the slightest bit of inner collapse. Her eyes were sorrowful. She sighed faintly. Her lips were pale. She was like a flower bud that was about to fall. Before it bloomed, it would lose all its color. Slash. Chapter 1070. Think whatever you want. It's a fact that I helped him. You can kill me. Fu Beige was hurt by her words. His body felt like it was being pricked by thousands of thorns. The pain was so intense that he couldn't even hold her arm anymore. She should be in pain. He pinched her so hard. But he was the one in pain. He really wanted to kill her. No traitor could survive in front of him. He was able to survive in such a dangerous environment because of his ruthless methods and his vigilant and intelligent mind. He always knew what he should do and what he shouldn't do. What could be sacrificed and what was dangerous must be eliminated immediately. She betrayed him. He wouldn't believe anything she said, let alone any of her expressions. Outside the door, an adjutant said carefully and respectfully, Young Marshal, we've caught the person. When Fu Beige heard this, he revealed a cold and bone-chilling smile. Oh, we've caught him. He let go of her wound. Her arm was covered in blood. The blood flowed into her fingers. Her slender and fair fingers were dyed red, which was even more glaring. Fu Beige's fingers were also covered in blood. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket expressionlessly. It was the one she dropped. He carefully protected it. It was still very new. But now he took it out and crumpled it into a ball like a rag. After wiping the blood off his hand, he threw the handkerchief on the ground. Then he picked her up and walked out with a cold expression. I've caught the person you want to save. I'm going to kill him in front of you with my own hands. His voice had never been so cold. Wei Wei Bai curled up in his chest. Her face was pale. Her arm was bleeding non-stop. The wound was torn open by his forceful pinch. Fu Beija was furious. Wei Wei Bai's mind worked quickly. She knew that she was in a difficult situation. The side mission was her obstacle, her life and death threshold. He would only give up after killing her a few times. Just as she thought of the side mission, Wei Wei Bai instinctively looked up. Your childhood friend is in a life and death crisis. Host, please complete the last small mission. Rescue the childhood sweetheart from the hands of the male lead and successfully let him board the train heading south. Also, add a parting words. Go south, go south, go south. Li Xinghe might as well change his name to Going South. Actually, this side quest was not called Childhood Sweethearts. Instead, it should be called A Childhood Sweetheart Sending Her Childhood Sweetheart South. He even wanted to give a parting message. Message, scram, scram, scram for me. Wei Wei Bai stared at the last time. This was the last time they would head south. Once they were done, they would be done with the side quest. If it wasn't for the fact that the punishment for this damned mission was the collapse of the Soul Channel, she really didn't want to do it. Even if the punishment was to expose her butt and dance in public, she would still dance. He suddenly realized that the previous punishments were actually quite good. Wei Wei Bai trembled a few times. Her bottom line was even lower. Fu Beija sensed that she was trembling. He resisted the urge to stop her bleeding. He wouldn't feel sorry for her anymore. She deserves to die. The car drove into the prison from last time. Wei Wei Bai was dragged forward by Fu Beija and stumbled. When he entered, he saw that Li Xinghe was hung up and beaten black and blue. This time, it wasn't special effects makeup. It was the real Li Xinghe who was beaten like a dog. Li Xinghe was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. When he saw Wei Wei Bai, his pupils constricted and he coughed a few times. Then, he fiercely spat out a few mouthfuls of blood and said coldly, Fu Beija, don't drag unrelated people into this. Fu Beija, however, smiled. His smile was smug and murderous. Is at https://www.sashu.com. Chapter 1071. He held Wei Wei Bai's waist, sat on the chair, and pulled her into his embrace. He stroked her back with one hand and pinched her chin with the other. Yo, the cowherd really knows the Weaver girl. You two are so alike. He said this, but stared at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's eyes flashed with a trace of pain. She did not say anything, but her stubbornness could be seen. One would rather die than submit. The other was silent. They were a match made in heaven. Fu Beija's gaze was like a knife, as if he wanted to cut the relationship between the two. He breathed heavily and suddenly turned to look at Li Xinghe with disdain. You must have a vault in the north. I have heard of the Li family's wealth. The Li family's wealth created such a glorious family. They also had a vault and a granary in the north. Only the descendants of the Li family knew the location. Fu Beija did not lack money, but he definitely did not mind having more money. He had wanted the Li family's wealth for a long time. Catching Li Xinghe was equivalent to catching a pile of money. Li Xinghe sneered, you set your sights on these things. Unfortunately, I didn't know. Even if you beat me to death, I still wouldn't know. He was stubborn. He could withstand any kind of punishment. He was not afraid of Fu Beija at all. Fu Beija faintly said, oh, and suddenly swept the table beside him with one hand. The tea and snacks on the table all fell to the ground and shattered, making an ear-piercing sound. Then he pressed Wei Wei Bai onto the table and tore open her collar without hesitation. her slender neck and exquisite collarbone. There was also a faint trace of white that was exposed to the air. Li Xinghe's body trembled violently, and he coughed up a few mouthfuls of blood. His internal organs were injured, and as long as he was agitated, he would vomit blood. He angrily shouted, "Fu Beija, what are you doing? How could this man humiliate Wei Wei Bai like this? Was he trying to drive her to her death?" Fu Beija raised his head, the veins in his eyes spreading. He said fiercely, "If I touch my own woman, do I need to report it to you?" He thought he could handle this matter calmly. After all, it wasn't as if he hadn't faced even greater storms and terrifying dangers before. But he still overestimated himself. When he saw that Li Xinghe and Wei Wei Bai really knew each other, his rationality collapsed. Fu Beija wanted to stab himself a few times. He did not allow himself to lose his composure and let others see that he had really fallen into the hands of a woman. Fu Beija put his hand under her clothes and looked at her coldly. She bit her lips until they bled, and the tears in her eyes refused to fall. He had bullied her badly. Fu Beija felt a sour feeling in his chest as he said, "How could you betray me?" These words were filled with unspeakable grievance. After saying this, he fiercely tore open her clothes, revealing a large piece of skin. Li Xinghe suddenly turned his head away and said in a hoarse voice, "I'm telling you, Fu Beija, don't touch her." Fu Beija's movements froze. He laughed twice, but his neck was stiff as he angrily said, "This is what you mean by being loyal. No matter how loyal I am, I will not use my ancestors' things to save people." The Li family's treasury was their foundation. When Li Xinghe handed over the northern treasury, it meant that he gave up everything in the north. In the future, not to mention assassinating him in the north, all of his Li family's businesses and spies in the north would be finished. He, Li Xinghe, would never dream of setting foot in the north in his life. If it weren't for the wealth in the treasury, Li Xinghe wouldn't have been able to organize these large-scale assassinations so quickly. However, Li Xinghe was willing to use those to save Wei Wei Bai. He wasn't happy at all. Chapter 1072. He just wanted to cut Li Xinghe into pieces. Wei Wei Bai finally released her lips and said in a choked voice, "My relationship with him is not as dirty as you think." Fu Beija did not want to hear it anymore. He lowered his head and bit her lips. He twisted and turned, using so much strength that he wanted to swallow her. Wei Wei Bai finally struggled. She was weak, but she tried her best. To her, this kind of humiliation in public was enough to make her break down. "Fu Beija, I can bear with it if you want to beat me or kill me, but you can't humiliate me like this." Fu Beija could barely hold on to her. Her lips slid across his cheek, bringing along a hot smell of blood. Her lips were already bleeding. Her arms were also covered in blood. Her face was so white and pitiful. For the first time, Fu Beija felt that she was going to be tormented to death by him. Women were really easy to torment. Li Xinghe was beaten to the point where his internal organs were bleeding, but he was still alive and kicking as he scolded him. He had only pinched her and kissed her, but her breathing had already weakened. Fu Beija hardened his heart and wanted to tear off all her clothes. He had always wanted to humiliate her. Only then could he be ruthless and let go of her. Fu Beija's hands that were on her clothes loosened and tightened. Her eyes were red, and she could not help but cry. She said, "Fu Beija, trust me just this once." She was in despair. It was the bullet that had ricocheted off her feet when she entered his house to marry him. Her eyes were still full of spirit as she looked at him. But today, she was crying as if she was going to die. Fu Beija's heart was crushed by her appearance. He was soft-hearted towards her, but in the end, he hated himself even more for not being ruthless enough. He left her bitterly, then took off his jacket and threw it on her. With trembling fingers, Wei Wei Bai put on the clothes. However, Fu Beija gave her a gun and said, "Kill Li Xinghe. This time, I will admit that you are still my woman." Wei Wei Bai stared at him blankly with a gun in her hand. Fu Beija was at the end of his patience. "Hurry up and kill him, or I'll go back on my word." She killed Li Xinghe. He forgave her. Fu Beija felt that he was really a coward. Even though she had betrayed him, he still wanted to forgive her. If this was the taste of liking someone, he didn't want to taste it anymore. It was bitter enough. Wei Wei Bai actually wanted to complete the side quest as well. She suddenly raised her gun and pointed it at Li Xinghe. Li Xinghe also stared at her blankly for a few seconds. Then, he suddenly smiled and said nothing. He wanted to protect her. Any words could anger Fu Beija and implicate Wei Wei Bai. Anyway, his life was saved by her. He was willing to die in her hands so that she wouldn't be implicated by him. Fu Beija looked on coldly. He wanted her to kill someone so that she would remember this pain. So that she wouldn't dare to betray him in the future. Wei Wei Bai's face was pale and she suddenly said, "Fu Beija, you really don't believe me? I don't have any feelings for him." Fu Beija's heart was burning. He sneered, "Do you think I'm stupid? If this isn't considered crossing the line, then what is? Do you want me to catch you lying on the same bed? What kind of loyalty was there between a man and a woman?" He only saw that Li Xinghe's eyes were full of love for her. Wei Wei Bai's eyes were filled with disappointment. Her fingers were trembling and she couldn't hold the gun properly. Her arm had lost too much blood. She staggered a few steps and seemed to be about to fall. Fu Beija didn't think much of it. He strode forward and reached out to hug her. Wei Wei Bai took the opportunity to rush into his arms. She grabbed his collar and pressed the muzzle of the gun against his chin. Fu Beija didn't react for a moment. The fragile tears in Wei Wei Bai's eyes disappeared. Her face was cold. "Let Li Xinghe go." Fu Beija's breathing became heavy. He gritted his teeth and said, "What did you say?" "Wei Wei Bai, say it again." Wei Wei Bai was silent for a moment. Suddenly, she hit Fu Beija's head with the butt of the gun. Blood flowed from Fu Beija's head. Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate anymore. She pressed the muzzle of the gun against his throat again. "People outside, listen up. Your young Marshal Mu is in my hands. Prepare a car for me and send us to the train station." Fu Beija's head was full of blood. His face was gloomy as he said, "If you dare to listen to her." Wei Wei Bai didn't hesitate. She hit his head again with the butt of the gun. She was as ruthless as if she had killed her father. "I won't send you off. I'll die with him. You must be very happy pinching her wound, right? You must be very excited about tearing her clothes, right? Go and do your main mission when she's made of mud." Chapter 1073. The car arrived quickly. Wei Wei Bai dragged Fu Beija to the car. There was a circle of soldiers with guns outside. Fu Beija's head was full of blood. His eyes were also stained with blood. He stared at Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai's face was cold. Her lips were pursed tightly. There was a kind of desperate determination in her eyes. Li Xinghe staggered and followed. He opened his mouth several times, but swallowed his words. He did not expect that Wei Wei Bai would kidnap Fu Beija to save him. Li Xinghe knew that it was useless to say anything now. He had to escape with her. Otherwise, if Fu Beija counterattacked, he and Wei Wei Bai would die. Fu Beija was stuffed into the back seat by Wei Wei Bai. Li Xinghe did not care about his weak body. He immediately got into the driver's seat and drove the car to the train station. Fu Beige's soldiers immediately followed behind with a bunch of cars. Everyone was in a deadlock. They were all afraid of accidentally firing. Fu Beige did not resist. Wei Wei Bai's gun did not leave his throat for a second. She was too focused. Her hands were trembling because she used too much force. But she was not willing to give him any chance to escape. Blood flowed again on her arm. Fu Beige's face was also full of blood. He was facing her. Li Xinghe sped up and almost rushed into the train station. Suddenly, Fu Beige asked softly, "Do you like him that much? So much that you want to use me as a bargaining chip to save him?" These words were soft and cold. It was like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue. But there was a trace of despair and sadness. Wei Wei Bai's eyelashes trembled a few times. Tears suddenly appeared in her black eyes. She blinked her eyes and held back her tears. She clenched her teeth and emphasized each word. "I don't like him. He's my friend, Fu Beige. I knew him when we were young. We were best friends. But we never had any feelings that we should not have. I once fell into the water. He pulled me out of the water. I remember this kindness." In the memories of that childhood sweetheart, there was indeed such a melodramatic plot. It seemed that it was to make their childhood sweetheart better. Kindness, Fu Beige's hatred and discomfort surged up at the same time. Kindness, you marrying me is kindness, you saving him is also kindness. By Wei Wei, I'm worse than him. She hit him for Li Xinghe. Wasn't Li Xinghe more important? Bai Weiwei's grip on the gun was particularly tight. Her long hair fell to her chest, and there was a trace of stubborn sadness on her face. "Because you humiliated me and doubted me." Fu Beige really hated her. He smiled sinisterly. "I didn't doubt you. Aren't you making me a cuckold? Why do I need to doubt you?" Wei Wei Bai was disappointed, but she stopped crying. She looked at him expressionlessly. Fu Beige was a little flustered. He felt that he had missed something. She laughed softly and self-deprecatingly. "You can think whatever you want. Since I dared to do this to you, I'm prepared to pay the price." Fu Beige's fingers were clenched tightly. His body was unbelievably tense and his eyes were red. He was like a leopard waiting to pounce, waiting for Wei Wei Bai to relax and take away the gun in her hand. She was such a gentle woman. She couldn't keep holding the gun against his throat with her injured hand. She would be tired and weak. She just needed to leave his throat for a second. He could take away her gun. Li Xinghe glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a very tense scene. Wei Wei Bai was almost sitting in Fu Beige's arms. Her black hair was spread out. In the afterglow, there was a soul-stirring beauty. // Chapter 1074. But Fu Beige's face was covered in blood. His handsome face had a murderous look as he lowered his head and looked at her coldly. The two of them were strong against strong. Neither of them was willing to back down. It was as if they could die together in the next moment. Li Xinghe's heart tightened. He coughed out a few more mouthfuls of blood. Enduring the pain in his internal organs, he finally drove the car into the train station. He said, "Wei Wei, we're here. Let's get on the train." The time was just right. The train heading south was about to depart. Wei Wei Bai expressionlessly ordered, "Get off the train." Fu Beige felt both hatred and pain, but he still had a strange feeling. This was the first time that someone dared to order him so coldly and threaten him. He thought that she was just a tough rabbit. Even if she was very brave, she was still a rabbit. But now he felt that she was the same as him. They were both hunting animals. The difference was that he was already an adult wolf. But she was just a wolf cub. This was the first time that Fu Beija looked at her so seriously. The train's whistle began to sound. Wei Wei Bai's fingers trembled, but she did not move the muzzle of the gun. There was a strange sense of calmness on her pale face. It was as if she wasn't running for her life, but was going to do something sacred instead. Her eyes should still be clear, sparkling with light. But they were already showing their edge. Fu Beija did not admit that she was still very beautiful. She was different from any other woman he had seen before. She was so beautiful that she was hard and clear. He lowered his eyelids and was about to move his fingers. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said vigilantly, "Don't move. Don't move your fingers." Fu Beija laughed contemptuously, "How long can you hold on? Even if you get on the train, I can still find you at the next station." Wei Wei Bai said, "I'm not running." Fu Beija did not believe it. How could she not run? She treated him like this. If she didn't run, would she stay here and wait for death? Li Xinghe coughed a few times and climbed onto the train. He turned around and said to Wei Wei Bai, "Come on up quickly." Fu Beija's soldiers had already caught up and surrounded the train with their guns. Wei Wei Bai dragged Fu Beija onto the train. Fu Beija sneered, "What? Do you still want to take me south?" Wei Wei Bai waited. The train started to move, and the sound of the tracks could be heard slowly. Wei Wei Bai suddenly leaned close to him. She said, "Fu Beija, if my feelings for you in the beginning were gratitude, now it's no longer the same. I have never liked a man so much. But I won't change my beliefs just to like someone. I am like this to you and to Li Xinghe. It has nothing to do with love, it's all because of gratitude." These words were said indifferently and resolutely. Then Wei Wei Bai suddenly used her strength and even knocked into Fu Beija, pushing him off the train. Fu Beija landed on the ground, rolled on the ground and jumped up quickly. He turned around and looked at the train with a murderous look. But what he saw was a heartbreaking scene. He did not have time to threaten her and hate her. But fear filled his chest. Wei Wei Bai was on the train. The train was slowly accelerating, but the gun in her hand was pressed against her chin. Her eyes were calm as she said loudly, "I betrayed you and saved Li Xinghe's life. I will use my own life to repay you, Fu Beija." With that, her finger touched the trigger and was about to press it. Fu Beija's brain did not react, but his body had already rushed out to chase after the train. "Wei Wei Bai, stop!" He screamed at the top of his lungs. How could she commit suicide? Even if she died, he would be the one to kill her. Chapter 1075. Not like this, not like watching her die in front of him. Bai Weiwei smiled, sighed, and no longer hesitated. Her finger pulled the trigger. This action of pulling the trigger, in Fu Beija's eyes, was slow and terrifying. He had never experienced such horrible torture before. All the blood in his body seemed to be frozen. Only his heart was beating violently in his chest, and his ribs were about to break. There had never been a person's death that could make him suffer such torture. With a bang, the bullet hit the door of the train. Li Xinghe's face was pale, and his lips were trembling violently. His hand tightly grasped the gun in Wei Wei Bai's hand, and at the critical moment, he pulled the bullet away from her throat and hit the metal plate above their heads. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. Li Xinghe had already gone crazy and snatched the gun from her hand. She was about to protest. Li Xinghe's expression hardened, and he used his palm to hit the back of her neck. Her vision turned black, and she fell to the ground. The train started to move faster. Fu Beija was still desperately chasing after the train. When he saw that Wei Wei Bai was saved by Li Xinghe, the fear in his heart immediately disappeared. For a moment, he actually thanked Li Xinghe for snatching the gun from Wei Wei Bai's hand. This woman, how could she be so strong? Li Xinghe hugged Wei Wei Bai, and looked coldly at Fu Beija who was below the train. He shouted hoarsely, "You don't deserve her, Fu Beija. I have never had anything to do with her. We are only friends." Wei Wei Bai used her own life to save him. He should also use his kindness to help her achieve her strength and innocence. He was not Fu Beija. When he loved someone, he wanted her to be happy and well. He did not want to hurt or suspect her. Fu Beija kicked something and fell to the ground. He ignored the pain and got up from the ground. The train had already run away. It was impossible to stop the train now, so they could only search at the next station. The adjutant behind him immediately rushed over. "Young Marshal, your injury." Fu Beija pulled his sleeves and wiped the blood off his face. He said fiercely, "Chase after him. Stop the train at the next station and check every single one of them. If you see Li Xinghe, catch him no matter if he's dead or alive." The adjutant hesitated. "What about Madam?" Fu Beija looked at him coldly, causing the adjutant to shiver. Fu Beija suddenly turned around and walked away, gritting his teeth as he said, "Bring her back in one piece." Even if he wanted to torture her and kill her. It was time for him to make a move. No one was allowed to touch it, not even herself. Fu Beija did not even bother to treat his wound and just got on the car that was chasing the train. After he got on the car and calmed down, he realized that his fingers were still trembling. He leaned back in his seat with a splitting headache. When he closed his eyes, he saw Wei Wei Bai holding a gun and looking at him calmly. Her black hair flew in the wind, her small face was as white as snow, but her eyes were filled with all her beauty. She had succeeded in making him think only of her. Whether it was hatred, love, or all kinds of complicated emotions. Fu Beija's mind was firmly occupied with Wei Wei Bai. He suddenly sneered. "Kindness, kindness, you're so righteous. You're clearly forcing me to die." How could she fulfill his kindness to save someone? And she pointed a gun at him. Fu Beija did not want to admit that what was rolling in his heart was grievance and jealousy. He was like a jealous man. When he hated someone, he clearly realized that his feelings for her still existed. Fu Beija reached out to rub his face, but he wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He reached out to cover his eyes and curled up his body in anguish. // Chapter 1076. The first time he liked a woman. He liked her to the point of hating himself. Ding, the male lead's favorability is at 65. Wei Wei Bai woke up from the shaking of the train. She struggled to blink her eyes. Only then did she remember that she had fainted. When she pointed the gun at herself, she had been looking for an opportunity. An opportunity for Li Xinghe to rush over. There was no system reminder. She could only rely on her own experience. So that scene just now was calculated and decided to take the risk after staking everything on one throw. Fortunately, the rhythm of her shooting was just right, giving Li Xinghe time to save her. She let out a sigh of relief. Looking at the side quest, she found that the side quest was almost finished. She thought about it. The previous quests didn't require her to personally send Li Xinghe south. It was enough to send him on the train south. She had already sent him on the train, so why wasn't it finished yet? Wei Wei Bai's mind was heavy. She had relied on herself to think and calculate too many things during this time. So her body was a bit weak. She quickly stopped herself from thinking and decided to empty her mind for a while. The main quest was now in hell mode because of her. She had to save energy to deal with Fu Beija who was about to go crazy. A good starting point for a target with a favorability of 0. In the end, it became a terrifying difficulty. Wei Wei Bai silently cursed the side quest 10,000 times in her heart. Suddenly she felt someone close to her. She opened her eyes and saw Li Xinghe with a worried frown, pulling the blanket over her. Seeing that she was awake, Li Xinghe was pleasantly surprised. "Are you feeling better, Wei Wei?" Wei Wei Bai looked at him in a daze. When would this side quest end? When she saw Li Xinghe, it was like seeing the main system's cheap face. She really wanted to slap him. Wei Wei Bai suppressed her impulse and forced a fake smile. "I'm fine." Li Xinghe sighed. "Don't do such stupid things in the future. If you want to prove your innocence, you can't use your own life." He finally understood that Wei Wei Bai liked Fu Beijia. She also had a strong and unyielding personality. She couldn't tolerate the person she liked doubting and insulting her, so she wanted to commit suicide. Wei Wei Bai's face was a little pale. She was tired. "I won't. I'm not that stupid." If it weren't for the fact that Li Xinghe would save her, she would have been taken aback. She had no choice but to run instead of putting on a show of suicide. If she committed suicide, perhaps Fu Beijia would be in a better mood and not hate her as much. Didn't her favorability increase by 5 points? Fu Beijia was probably thinking of ways to torture her to death. He would only be happy when he saw her in a miserable state. Wei Wei Bai was very experienced. Previously, many of her targets couldn't wait for her to die at the start. So when she acted pitiful and pretended to be a little white flower, he would be happy. Once he was happy, his favorability would increase. Thinking of this, why did she feel that she was living a miserable life? Wei Wei Bai quickly stopped thinking about it. The more she thought about it, the worse her mood became. She might as well continue being heartless. Li Xinghe saw her tired face and didn't dare to believe her words. He looked at her blankly for a while before saying gently, "Wei Wei, if you follow me to the south this time, I'll recognize you as my younger sister, okay?" She couldn't go back. He knew what kind of person Fu Beijia was. He would not let Wei Wei Bai go. Wei Wei Bai was about to shake her head. Li Xinghe said, "Don't reject me." He didn't dare to say that he wanted to pursue her. He was afraid that he would blaspheme her. But he loved her and was willing to do anything for her. Wei Wei Bai thought for a moment before replying, "I'll think about it. Actually, it's not suitable for me to go to the south with you. If I go with you, then Fu Beijia will kill his way to the south and kill you. With Fu Beijia's personality, he would definitely do such a crazy thing. He would probably beat her to death as well." Li Xinghe sat up straight and looked at her with a deep and gentle gaze. Although his face was scarred, he still looked elegant and handsome. "Wei Wei." His voice was calm, but it seemed like he had used up all his strength. "Don't use your life to protect me. In the future, let me use my life to protect you." /to-txt. Chapter 1077. Wei Wei Bai was stunned. She did not expect him to be so serious. After Li Xinghe finished speaking, he revealed a gentle smile, as if he did not feel that he had said anything serious. He brought over a glass of water. "Drink this. I'll go to the restaurant to get some food. We still need a long time to go south. You need to eat." Wei Wei Bai had no choice but to take the glass. She saw that her arm had already been bandaged. On the train, Li Xinghe was very familiar with it. He was able to get some basic things. He was indeed the little prince of the south. After sitting on the train so many times, he had gained experience. After eating, Wei Wei Bai said, "We have to get off the train halfway. We can't get off at the next station. At the next station, the train will definitely not leave. This was because Fu Beijia was waiting. Li Xinghe smiled. I know. There will be a transit station later. The train should stop for a while. When the time comes, we can quickly get off the train and change to another train. There was not only one train at the transit station. Trains from other tracks would also come. It would only stop for a short while. At that time, it would not be too late to change trains. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Although she did not intend to go south, she could only avoid it for a while. Otherwise, Fu Beijia would be angry and get caught by him. Her head would probably be blown off by him. The train stopped very quickly. Li Xinghe carefully helped Wei Wei Bai off the train. There were many people at the transit station. They walked to the other side and saw another train coming from afar. The train stopped and started very quickly. They had to grasp the timing quickly. Otherwise, they would miss it. When the other train stopped, Li Xinghe immediately walked forward. He got on the train and reached out to hold Wei Wei Bai's hand. Hurry up, the train is about to leave. Wei Wei Bai nodded and was about to reach out. Suddenly, Li Xinghe's expression changed. Lie down, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai didn't have time to react. She didn't lie down, but a bullet passed by her and shot toward Li Xinghe's forehead. Li Xinghe instinctively rolled into the train to avoid the bullet. But the train starts, and Wei Wei Bai doesn't have time to get on. Li Xinghe leaned on the train, stretched out his arm and shouted anxiously, Hold my hand, Wei Wei. Wei Wei Bai's heart tightened. She took a few steps forward and reached out to grab Li Xinghe's hand. His other hand gripped her fingers tightly. Under the sun, that hand was slender and beautiful. There were calluses on the palm, which made Wei Wei Bai's hand hurt. She was pulled into a hot and strong embrace. Wei Wei Bai heard the hot and messy breath of the man behind her blowing on the side of her face. Escape. Where else can you escape to? Wei Wei Bai's body stiffened. She looked up and saw Fu Beijia's tense jaw. His eyes were cold as if covered with a layer of frost as he looked at her, exuding a murderous aura. It couldn't be any colder. Fu Beijia was too fast. Fortunately, Li Xinghe didn't have time to get off the train and was taken away by the train. Wei Wei Bai saw that the side mission was stuck at the last point. She suddenly remembered that she had forgotten to say a parting word to Li Xinghe. If she had shouted, "Take care," just now, the side mission would have been completed. The side task was completed, Bai Wei Wei lamented. Fu Beijia dragged Wei Wei Bai onto the train. He glanced at her arm. There was a doctor accompanying them on the train. Fu Beijia's head hadn't been bandaged yet. He just wiped his face with a towel. His face was dark and his eyes were cold. He looked like he was telling strangers not to come near and acquaintances to scram. The doctor took out the medicine box with trepidation and wanted to clean his wound. Fu Beijia said, "Remove her bandage." Chapter 1078. The doctor was stunned. When he saw Wei Wei Bai beside him, he immediately nodded and removed the bandage on Wei Wei Bai's arm. Bai Wei Wei didn't resist at this point. At this point, even if Fu Beijia hung her at the back of the train and pulled her along, no one would dare to say anything. Once the bandage was removed, the wound on her arm became even more serious. The wound that was about to heal was torn apart by Fu Beijia's forceful pinch. Because she wanted to hold him hostage, she used too much strength. When they reached the train, she could only bandage it hastily. If it was allowed to worsen, she did not need to think about her arm. When Fu Beijia saw it, his eyes became even colder. Because Fu Beijia, who was like a killing god, was sitting beside the doctor, and because of Wei Wei Bai's identity, when the doctor cleaned her wound again, his hands and feet were tied. The cleaning technique was not neat, and Wei Wei Bai could not help but frown in pain. Fu Beija suddenly snatched the tools from the doctor's hand, and then silently grabbed Wei Wei Bai's arm. Because his strength was simply too great. Wei Wei Bai's muscles trembled uncontrollably. Fu Beija's fingers paused, but he said coldly, "You know the pain. You deserve it." After saying that, he quickened his pace of cleaning the wound. Then, he took a clean white bandage, applied medicine on her, and quickly helped her to bandage it again. After he finished bandaging, he did not care about what Wei Wei Bai thought. He dragged the medical kit and said to the doctor, "Deal with it." The wound on his head needed to be treated. Wei Wei Bai used all her strength and knocked a hole in his head. It looked scary, but it was not a fatal wound. It was lighter than Wei Wei Bai's arm. The doctor nodded and immediately cleaned him and applied medicine. When she was about to bandage his wound, Fu Beija looked at Wei Wei Bai gloomily. "You do it." Wei Wei Bai saw that the look in his eyes was very scary. It was as if he wanted to kill her, but he was holding it in. Right now, it wasn't a matter of strategy. It was a matter of survival. Wei Wei Bai took the bandage and slowly wrapped it around the wound on his head. At the same time, she tied a small bow. Fu Beija felt her approach and his breathing became heavier. He didn't know if it was out of anger or hatred. He suddenly grabbed her hand. "When Li Xinghe was injured, did you also bandage him like this?" Wei Wei Bai did not answer. Instead, she finished dressing her wound and sat down again. Fatigue was written all over her face. Outside the car window, night began to fall. Only the occasional light shone in, making the side of her face look even more pale and colorless. Fu Beija's mind flashed with the image of her unhesitatingly pulling out a gun to commit suicide. He held his breath and suddenly reached out to pull her into his arms. His hands were already searching her body skillfully. Wei Wei Bai's silent attitude was finally broken. She struggled to get up. "Fu Beija, if you want to hit or kill me, just say the word. Don't do this to me in front of outsiders." Her tone was extremely cold, but because of her trembling throat, there was a trace of grievance. Fu Beija's fingers stiffened. He hesitated for a moment and actually let go of her. Wei Wei Bai immediately dodged and leaned against the car window. She grabbed her collar and looked at him warily. Fu Beija sneered. "You said that you only like Li Xinghe and that you like me. How can you like me like this?" Wei Wei Bai helplessly raised the corner of her mouth, but she just sighed and did not answer him. This man was not easy to fool. It was useless no matter what she said. Without the right timing, she might lose his good impression of her. Fu Beija's heart was burning with anxiety when he saw her half-dead state. With a sweep of his hand, he swept the box of pills away and said, "Go to the hospital." Chapter 1079. He would never admit that he had been searching her body to see if she had a gun on her. Although he was only halfway through the search, he reacted quickly. Since Li Xinghe saved her, he would not take the risk of letting her hold a gun. After going to the hospital, Fu Beija pulled Wei Wei Bai to see the doctor again with a gloomy face. Although the wound was treated, it was not as professional as the hospital. Wei Wei Bai's wound was stitched up again. The doctor repeatedly reminded her not to touch water and not to use force. Otherwise, this arm would not be able to recover. Wei Wei Bai sat quietly and did not answer. Instead, Fu Beija said impatiently, "Okay, let's go home." "Go home?" Wei Wei Bai looked up at him. Fu Beija did not look at her at all. The so-called home was Fu Beija's house in the city. It was a 4-story house with a beautiful garden and balcony. There was also a lotus pond. It was not as spacious as the old house. but it could be said to be exquisite and comfortable. Fu Beija had more than one property, but this was the best place. The house was heavily guarded. After entering, it was difficult to leave without permission. After Wei Wei Bai was sent in, she realized that her things had been sent in before her. She thought that after Fu Beija caught her, he would torture her body and lungs like the prison version of torture. It was dinner time, and the servants served the dishes. Both of them did not look good. One of them had a bandage on her arm, and the other had a bandage on her head. They were in the same boat, but they looked at each other coldly. When Wei Wei Bai was eating, she only ate the dish in front of her silently. She did not move because her arm was in so much pain. Halfway through the meal, she noticed that Fu Beija was looking at her gloomily. She looked up without any expression. The target was not easy to win over. It was a critical stalemate now. Actually, Wei Wei Bai felt that this situation was already very good. That 65 favorable impression level was already very useful. Fu Beija could not bear to torture her. After all, Fu Beija was not a soft-hearted man. Right now, she had to maintain the 65 points of favorability and not let it drop. Only then could she find an opportunity to slowly increase the favorability. Therefore, when faced with Fu Beija's gloomy expression, Wei Wei Bai decided to maintain her expressionless face. He continued to eat the white rice and the plate of vegetables in front of him. Fu Beija stared at her for a while and finally couldn't hold it in anymore. He shouted at the maid, "I don't like this dish. Put it over there." The maid immediately came up and moved the dishes he didn't want to Wei Wei Bai. Fu Beija was not satisfied. He ordered a few more dishes and took them away. They were all lined up in front of Wei Wei Bai. Wei Wei Bai had just finished a bowl of rice and was full. She looked at the extra dishes in front of her and looked at Fu Beija with some doubt. Fu Beija lowered his head and looked at her coldly. He quietly ate the rice. Wei Wei Bai put down her chopsticks and said, "I'm done eating. You can do as you please." After saying that, she put down her chopsticks and walked away. Fu Beija looked at the other party's empty chair and the dishes he asked someone to move over. None of them were touched. He suddenly couldn't eat anymore. After eating a few mouthfuls of rice, he finally couldn't swallow and put his chopsticks on the table. Then he said coldly, "Clear the table." Wei Wei Bai's room was Fu Beija's room. She went upstairs and washed herself simply. She wore a light green thin dress and walked out of the bathroom. She saw Fu Beija sitting at the table handling business. Chapter 1080. Actually, when Fu Beija was pressing down on her and doing things that were worse than a beast, she felt that he was especially hot. But she thought that it was because of lust. She did not expect that this man was actually having a fever. Wei Wei Bai reached out and touched his forehead. There was no sweat, but it was very hot. His face was also burning red. Maybe it was because of the fever, but he did not have his usual vigilance. His usual cold and sloppy side was nowhere to be seen. His eyes were closed, and his eyelashes were thick and beautiful. His face was red and had a hint of fragile beauty. For a man, gorgeous was obviously not a good description. But it did not feel wrong to use it on Fu Beija. This man was already arrogantly handsome, and his appearance was too outstanding. He did not have his usual aura, which showed the advantage of his face. Wei Wei Bai stared at him for a few seconds, then slowly looked down. The system finally could not help but ask carefully, "Do you want to castrate him?" The host's gaze was like a knife, cold and sideways, as if she wanted to cut off the male lead's thing. Wei Wei Bai moved her body. She got off the bed with great effort, and her lower body was like a cripple. She said hatefully, "I really want to castrate him, if the affection level is not 0 and goes back to negative. After saying that, she opened the closet and changed her clothes. She did not bring many of those old-fashioned clothes. Most of them were newly made cheongsams, overcoats and expensive fox sweater collar jackets. She ignored them and casually took out a cheongsam with half sleeves and put it on. Then she went downstairs to call the doctor. The doctor came quickly and confirmed that Fu Beige's fever was caused by the wound on his head. Although the wound was not fatal, Fu Beige did not treat it immediately, and he did not get a good rest. This caused the fever to come so fiercely. Wei Wei Bai secretly scolded him as a beast. He still wanted to force himself on her even when he had a fever. He was simply a beast among beasts, and he was a beast among beasts. Fu Beige was sleepy, but he was still very vigilant. When the doctor lowered his temperature, he suddenly opened his eyes. His gaze was terrifyingly cold. The doctor was almost scared to tears. He glared at the doctor a few times. Then, as if he suddenly thought of something, he immediately turned his head to look around. He actually looked a little panicked. It wasn't until he saw Bai Weiwei that he relaxed. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Wei Wei Bai, allowing the doctor to treat him. Wei Wei Bai sat on a chair at the side. Her face carried a trace of imperceptible worry. Her posture of leaning on the chair was indescribably languid and beautiful. This was not the first time Fu Beige saw her wearing a cheongsam. When she wore the cheongsam, her curves were like flowing water, natural and elegant. Her snow-white arms and exquisite calves were both eye-catching and beautiful. The beauty that couldn't be seen when she wore old-fashioned dresses could be seen when she changed into a cheongsam. He didn't want her to wear a cheongsam for outsiders to see. But when he thought about it, if he kept her in the small building, she would not be able to see any outsiders. In that case, she would just wear a cheongsam for him to see. Therefore, he locked up all her old-fashioned dresses and had people make many of the latest cheongsams. It was indeed very good and very beautiful. Fu Beige stared blankly at Wei Wei Bai until he was exhausted from the fever again and fell into a deep sleep. However, he could not sleep well. From time to time, he would open his eyes to look for Wei Wei Bai. In the end, her heart finally softened. She frowned and sat by the bed, reaching out to hold his hot fingers. Sleep, I haven't left. Slash. Chapter 1081. These words were said lightly, but Fu Beige didn't know why his eyes were wet. He looked at her expression that softened. Finally, he believed a little that she liked him. Then, he fell asleep again, this time for a long time. Wei Wei Bai waited for a long time, but there was no sign of favorability. The system said, "Looks like the difficulty of the strategy has increased. A normal strategy of warmth can't shake the male lead's heart." It was also because the male lead had been deceived too many times. Even if the soul lost all its memories and started all over again, there would be a strong trace of vigilance. This was also why the host felt that the following strategies were getting harder and harder. Wei Wei Bai wasn't discouraged. She said, "The strategy of warmth is still useful, but it won't work once or twice. After accumulating it many times, the effect will be seen. After so many planes of experience, the host could be considered to have matured a lot." At least in terms of strategy, there were many difficult things that she had experience in. The system thought as it secretly gnawed on potato chips. This blind date trip, it was starving. It was also because it was too hungry that when it secretly attacked the main system, it was attacked. The system looked at its even more dispirited and short stature. Thinking about the main system, that old bastard had been asleep for so long, but the few strands of consciousness were still insanely strong. It was about to succeed, just a little bit more, and it would have been able to change Wei Wei Bai's fate. So that she wouldn't have to suffer the pain of transmigration. So that she could be safe for the rest of her life, and not be exploited by these lousy missions. So that she wouldn't have to rely on Yushuan to survive. But it failed. The system had a deep hatred, and silently ate another handful of potato chips. Fortunately, the main system didn't catch it, or else its host would have lost the system and be held captive by Fu Beija in this plane. Wei Wei Bai suddenly said, "You're eating potato chips secretly again." The system pouted. During the blind date, the other Tongzi complained that I was too skinny. I need to eat more to become fatter. Wei Wei Bai said. Then you should buy some meat. Don't eat potato chips. Spicy food is harmful to the body and mind. Don't eat it and ruin your body. Wei Wei Bai, buy the cheapest meat. The system suddenly felt that no matter how vicious its host's mouth was, it was still a good thing. The wounds suddenly stopped hurting. Wei Wei Bai leaned against the bed and chatted with the system while wiping Fu Beija's sweat to lower his temperature. No matter how useless the system was, it was the first time it had been separated from her for so long. It was back. The uneasiness in her heart suddenly disappeared, and she felt invincible again. In the middle of the night, Fu Beija began to sweat. His lips were a little pale, and the straps on his head were soaked with sweat. Wei Wei Bai frowned. She wiped him down and changed into his pajamas. She began to remove his bandages again, wanting to change them to prevent the wound from festering. Just as she finished changing the bandages, her hand was held by Fu Beija. He opened his eyes. Although he was tired, his gaze was very clear. His eyes were bright and slightly trembling. Tell me, other than me and Li Xinghe, how many benefactors do you have that you need to repay? Wei Wei Bai was stunned. After thinking for a while, she shook her head. No. Fu Beija looked at her in disbelief. Really? If Li Xinghe kills me again, who will you help next time? Wei Wei Bai lowered her head. Her hair that was not tied up fell softly. She lowered her eyes and looked at him for a long time before saying softly, "I'll help you." These words touched his heart. Fu Beija did not want to believe it, but his heart was softened by her words. He held her hand and stared blankly for a long time before saying weakly, "Don't lie to me. I'm just muddling along. If you lie to me, you can kill me." Wei Wei Bai smiled. Her lips had a seductive luster under the light. She said, "Okay, if you find out that I'm lying to you, you can kill me." Fu Beija gritted his teeth and said, "Who said I'm going to kill you? The one I'm going to kill is Li Xinghe." Slash. Chapter 1082. Wei Wei Bai faintly raised her eyebrows. Her strategy of warmth had actually risen at this time. During the meal, Fu Beija stared at Wei Wei Bai, who was sitting under the light, eating quietly and elegantly. He gave her all the dishes that she liked. Then he said to her, "During this period of time, I will be heading south." Wei Wei Bai almost choked to death on her food. Heading south, my foot. Why did even Fu Beija want to go south? Fu Beija saw that her expression was not good and thought that she was worried about him. Immediately, the unbearable feeling of wanting to separate was relieved. His expression became gentle. "Wei Wei, I have to settle my grudges with the Li family. I am at odds with the South. Furthermore, I have been preparing for 2 years. It's time for me to go south and destroy the Li family." Wei Wei Bai raised her head and frowned. "Must we fight?" Fu Beija's handsome face had a few traces of killing intent, making him look cold and determined. He said softly, "In this world, it's either you die or I live. If we don't unite, then the common people will not be able to live a decent life." Wei Wei Bai's eyes had a few traces of surprise, as if she did not expect him to say such words. Fu Beija's face turned red when he was looked at by her. He immediately ate 2 mouthfuls of rice and said vaguely, "Of course, I am not that selfless. I am greedy for power and I don't want to be suppressed by anyone, so I must win." The Leaf family was his biggest obstacle. He wanted to move away and kick it away. He wanted her to live in a peaceful world without war in the future. And not be in constant danger because of him. When these words were said to Wei Wei Bai, he felt a little embarrassed. Furthermore, he would not say anything that had not been achieved yet. Suddenly, a piece of red braised pork appeared in his bowl. Wei Wei Bai gave it to him. He raised his head to look at her, only to find that she was eating slowly with her head down, as if the person who picked up the food for him was someone else. Fu Beija couldn't help but reveal a smile. He said, "This time, I'm going south. The early deployment and the attack on the southern powers will take about 2 months. Can you wait for me? Tidy up the south and let his forces stand at the top." Of course, it couldn't be 2 months. It could be a few years faster, or even 10 years slower. However, 2 months was enough for him to establish a relatively safe area in the south. When the time came, he would come back to pick her up. After finishing her dinner, Wei Wei Bai raised her head to look at him. Her eyes were like water, carrying a gentle reluctance to part with him. She said, "Go, I won't let you worry." These words made Fu Beija tremble. He had always fought alone, and this was the first time he realized the benefits of having a woman behind him. She said that she wouldn't let him worry, not only about herself, but also about his entire rear. Fu Beija didn't know why, but he believed her words so much. At night, after he finished showering, he saw Wei Wei Bai still lying on the sofa, reading a book. Her appearance was soft and gentle, and her freshly washed black hair fell under the sofa, cool and beautiful. Fu Beija couldn't help but stare at her. For the first time, his heart felt stable. When he first found out that he was being forced to marry, his entire body was burning with anger. Since when could other people make decisions about his matters? And it was such an important matter in his life. When he hurried to the north to stop it, he asked someone to inquire about Wei Wei Bai. Although he didn't find out much, he knew that she was raised like a girl in a boudoir. She didn't leave the house and had never received a Western education, let alone go to school. He already had a big discount in his heart. / Chapter 1083. This kind of woman was feudal and pedantic. It was one thing for her to be stupid. She might not even know how to read. What was more frightening was that her 3 views were definitely not the same as his. This kind of woman, it was not that he was conceited, but he really felt that she was not good enough for him. That was why the day he rushed over happened to be the wedding day, and he was forced to carry the sedan chair to the main entrance. That slap felt like it was on his face. He asked someone to post a notice of freedom of marriage just to give both parties a way out. To let her break off the engagement with dignity. Fu Beija admitted that he was selfish, but not to the extent of being a scumbag. But he did not expect that when she entered the door, the bullet that he shot did not scare her out, but trapped himself. Fu Beija walked to her side, slowly squatted down, and rested his head on her knee. He was like a big child, with his hands around her waist. He did not say anything, and just looked at her silently. As if he could look at her like this for a lifetime. Wei Wei Bai was holding a book in her hand and looked at him with some surprise. "What's wrong?" Fu Beija shook his head. "Your body is soft and comfortable. Be my pillow." Every time before he went to the battlefield, he needed to find something to relax. In the past, it was wine or horse racing with those officers. Doing something fun and exciting. But tonight, he was going to fight the biggest battle, but surprisingly, he just wanted to lean on her and look at her. That thrill-loving and adventurous heart in his body settled down. Wei Wei Bai looked at him silently for a while, then she put down the book and kissed his forehead. Fu Beija smiled, and there was a trace of silly satisfaction in his smile. He sighed softly. No wonder they say that the beauty is the most damaging trap for a hero. I understand now. If you stop me and don't let me go, I will really listen to you. Wei Wei Bai knew that Fu Beija was saying sweet nothings. Men are full of tricks when they say sweet nothings. She really wanted him not to go out and face this old woman every day. Putting aside the fact that the favorable impression points had stagnated, they might even regress. A man like Fu Beija was like an eagle. She couldn't restrain him. She had to set him free or go with him. Otherwise, her favorable impression of him wouldn't drop like that. She thought about it a few times, but her face was still as gentle as ever. I believe that you can come back, and I also believe that you can succeed. Whatever you want to do, I will not stop you. I will only support you. What she said was also in line with her old-fashioned and feudal character. Wei Wei Bai's persona had actually collapsed a lot, but she thickened her skin and felt that her persona would also grow. After all, it was fine as long as Fu Beija liked her. Sure enough, when he heard her words, his eyes lit up as if he had found a soulmate. He couldn't help but rub his face against her thigh, just like a silly dog that had retracted its wolf tail. As he rubbed against her, his gaze and actions started to change. His voice was hoarse. Wei Wei, are you still in pain? Wei Wei Bai was expressionless. She picked up the book again and read it seriously. It hurts. It hurts a lot. It was obvious that she wasn't going to fall for it. Fu Beija's face turned red. Then I'll help you rub it. Wei Wei Bai, the system licked the potato chips silently, not letting the host hear that it was secretly eating potato chips. He said to Bai Weiwei, let's go, BA. Just treat it as whoring a man with 8 abs. Think about it, in the modern world, a duck with such a good figure, such a good appearance, would cost a sky-high price. Weiwei Bai, damn, did the system and its target have no moral integrity? Quick. Chapter 1084. Couldn't he have a bit of shame? His brain was filled with dirty trash and he actually wanted to drag her down with him. Was she that low of a person? She barely had some integrity. Weiwei Bai reached out to push away Fu Beija's face and said with a cold expression, you'll be heading south tomorrow morning, so rest early. Don't waste energy on meaningless things. Fu Beija looked at her with sparkling eyes and said in a very gentle voice, all right, I'll listen to you. Weiwei Bai let out a sigh of relief as she escaped this calamity. Just as she was thinking this, she was suddenly picked up by him. Fu Beija pressed her down on the bed and unbuttoned her blouse with his warm fingers. His rough palms caressed her delicate skin, causing her to shiver. Weiwei Bai's expression changed. Didn't you say you'd listen to me? Fu Beija innocently looked at her with a roguish appearance. That's right, didn't I listen to you and not waste energy on meaningless things? He said this as his body covered her. His breath blew on her face, bringing a passionate fire. But being with you is the most meaningful thing. There is nothing more meaningful than this. This was the truth, it had never been this meaningful before. It was meaningful to the point that he felt very happy. Ding, the male lead's favorable impression has increased to 80. In the morning, Fu Beija put on his military uniform and buttoned up the cold buttons. He then picked up his hat and put it on. The man in the mirror was already cold and unyielding. His martial attire made him look even more austere. However, when his gaze landed on the sleeping woman on the bed, his stern demeanor immediately turned into gentleness. He came to the side of the bed and looked at her sleeping on her side. His brows slightly knit together. She was very tired. His fingers gently smoothed her brows and then he kissed her red and swollen lips. Then he stood up again and placed a document on the table before turning to leave. Last night, he deliberately made her so tired that she couldn't wake up because he couldn't bear to see her reluctant gaze. He didn't want to be separated from her. He could only leave early. When Wei Wei Bai woke up, Fu Beijia had already left. The system said, he boarded the plane and headed straight south. This time, the male lead will probably be gone for a long time. We only have 1 month left, we can't wait for him to come back. Moreover, the side quest was not completed. It was stuck in a parting sentence. Wei Wei Bai yawned. Let's find a time to go down south as well. Only by going through thick and thin together can we fill up our last good impression. Fu Beijia, that man, had gone through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames to make him give up his life for her. She had to risk her life to accompany him. Therefore, it was a good opportunity for her that he was going to fight. Of course, it was useless to chase after him now. After some time, when he was in danger, it would be more sincere for her to rush over. It was very easy to be in danger on the battlefield. Therefore, Wei Wei Bai was very leisurely. She ate, drank, played, and enjoyed the scenery. She had someone to pick her up and take care of her life. She wished there was no such thing as a strategy. She might as well just live like this without ambition. After about 10 days, even the system could not stand it anymore. Wake up, host, you have to work. The system suddenly felt that it was the life of an old maid. If the host was tired, it would be annoyed. If the host was too idle, it would be annoyed. Wei Wei Bai ate an apple and read a romance novel. Although the novel in this world had a sense of age, the writing style and plot were excellent. It was really good. She said, no hurry, there are still 10 or 20 days. Let me finish reading these novels first. System, where is your bottom line? Where is your integrity? Where is your work ethic? It was all eaten up by the novels. Suddenly, an officer guarding the door walked in. He stood at the door and bowed his head respectfully. Madam, there is a guest. Wei Wei Bai looked up indifferently. Who is it? The officer said, it's Chenru. He directly said Chenru, without any respect for Fu Beijia's stepmother. It was also because of Fu Beijia's order that they shouted like that. Wei Wei Bai nodded. Let her in. Chenru walked in wearing a red cheongsam and a coat with a fox collar. She was not old and looked somewhat beautiful. She saw Bai Wei Wei reclining in a chair, wearing a light blue cheongsam with long sleeves, casually draped in a satin jacket. She looked noble and elegant. She even wore an expensive jade bracelet on her wrist. She looked like a lotus flower in clear water, so beautiful that it shone. Chenru's heart was sour, but she sat down quietly and said to Wei Wei Bai, Wei Wei, there is something that I should tell you. Wei Wei Bai did not pay much attention to her. If she was not the target, she really did not want to bother. She was bored and wanted to see what kind of fun Chenru could bring, so she let her in. Seeing Wei Wei Bai's indifferent attitude, Chenru's nails dug into the flesh of her palm. I'll let you go crazy, but you'll cry later. Chenru sneered, but her voice was sad. Beijia is dead, do you know? Chapter 1085. Wei Wei Bai. The system immediately said, that's not true, you're lying. He was only shot once, right in the chest, grazing his heart. He was betrayed by his own adjutant, so he had no choice but to head north overnight, but was blocked by Li Xinghe in the south. In the end, he was barely alive and was hiding in a warehouse in the slums of Li Xinghe's territory. As long as we can contact the army, we can kill that betraying adjutant and revive him. Wei Bai, wait, what's with this series of words and so much information? It's all commas. When Chen Ru saw Bai Wei, she finally showed a surprised expression. She couldn't help but smile secretly. Then, she pretended to be worried and said, Wei Bai, Beija insisted on going against the south. In the end, he was shot in the chest and fell into the water. Although his body hasn't been found yet, we all know that he's dead. Wei Bai looked up at her. Her eyes were cold, like a pool of water or ice. Chen Ru saw that she was still calm and her fingers were clenched. Something was wrong with her eyes. She didn't believe that Wei Bai would be so calm after hearing about Fu Beija's death. Wasn't Wei Bai's good life now all because of Fu Beija? She was the one who invited Wei Bai into the family with the help of the elders in the family. She also tried her best to find out. She knew that Wei Bai was a traditional and obedient girl who didn't have much experience. If such a woman entered the Fu family, she would be able to do whatever she wanted to her. However, after Wei Bai entered the family, she actually fell in love with Fu Beija. Fu Beija actually took Wei Bai away. This made it impossible for her and the elders in the family to do anything to Wei Bai. He had really suffered a double loss. Thinking about how Fu Beija had suppressed her family, the hatred in her heart surged, and her voice turned cold. Wei, although Beija is dead, you are still his widow. Are you pregnant? Chen Ru looked at her worriedly. Wei Bai was expressionless. What is it? It was as if he really didn't know what she was asking. Chen Ru lowered her voice and asked, Do you have a child? You can only inherit Beija's assets if you have a child. Otherwise, you will be chased out of the Fu family. Wei Bai reached out and touched her stomach, where she had just eaten. Then, she slowly stretched out her fingers and combed her hair gracefully. Then, under Chen Ru's anxious gaze, she said softly, I just had my period, so I don't think so. Chen Ru's face darkened. She gritted her teeth and hurriedly said, You can't say that. You have to tell others that you're pregnant with Fu Beija's child to maintain your current comfortable life. Chen Ru didn't believe that Wei Bai would be willing to part with her current life. To make Wei Bai's life better, Fu Beija had sent all the tailors, chefs, and jewelry stores in the city to serve her. This small building was not small at all. There were many places outside the building that belonged to Fu Beija. Even the army could drive in. It was the safest place to live. Not to mention, there must be all the documents of Fu Beija's wealth in the study. Even if Chen Ru was living a life of luxury provided by the Fu family, when she saw Wei Bai being pampered so much, her eyes turned red. She had tried her best to coax the other half of the military order out of Marshal Fu. If she had half of the Fu family's military strength, everyone would have to obey her, and no one would dare to give in to her. Even if Fu Beija came back to life, he would have to be respectful to her. Chapter 1086. Therefore, Wei Bai's child was very important. Without the child, the military order in her hand would be useless. Wei Bai seemed to have heard something strange. She said, I'm not pregnant, how can I lie? Chen Ru sneered, Of course you can. No one will know if you're pregnant during your pregnancy. When your belly is bigger, you can stuff some cotton wool or something to hide it from people. My sister-in-law is pregnant and can be in time for your delivery. Her motive was obvious. The child belonged to Chen Ru's family. Fu Beija's family property would all belong to Chen Ru's family. Then, Chen Ru would be able to use the military force. She would get all the benefits. This woman was too greedy. Wei Wei Bai listened to the system report on Fu Beige's situation. He would not die. But because of that shot, his body was on the verge of collapse. Wei Wei Bai calculated the days. If she went south now, she should be able to be in time for Fu Beige to share the joys and sorrows. The favorability was beckoning to her. Wei Wei Bai put down the book and sat up straight. Then she said softly, "Old witch, your words are so beautiful. I wonder how you are so thick-skinned." "I'm so thick-skinned, but I'm blushing." Chen Ru suddenly stood up and her face changed. "Is this how you talk to your mother-in-law?" Wei Wei Bai said, "Since ancient times, mother-in-law and daughter-in-law have been at odds. We are enemies. Don't be too close." Chen Ru smiled sinisterly. She did not expect Wei Wei Bai to be so stubborn. She did not give her any face at all. She had lost her husband and had no one to rely on. How dare she be so arrogant? Chen Ru said, "It seems that you are going to fall out with me. I don't know who helped you to marry into our family, but now you are repaying kindness with ingratitude." Wei Wei Bai looked up. The murderous look in her eyes was like a knife that pierced people's backs. "I heard that you have half of the Fu family's military order." Chen Ru thought she was scared. "Yes, I do." Wei Wei Bai looked at her from head to toe, as if looking for something. Chen Ru felt uncomfortable under her gaze. "Why are you looking at me?" Wei Wei Bai nodded. "The military order is such an important thing. Normally, you would definitely hide it. But today, you want to ally with me. To show your sincerity or gain my trust, you would definitely carry such an expensive thing with you." Her guess was not far from the truth. The system casually reminded him, "It's in the sachet on her waist." Chen Ru's expression tightened as she glared at Wei Wei Bai with resentment. She said, "Whether it's on me or not, you don't have a share, let alone use it. Today, I actually wanted to save you, I was really blind." After saying that, Chen Ru turned around and walked out with her head held high. However, the cold muzzle of a gun was pointed at the back of her head. Then, Wei Wei Bai's indifferent voice sounded, "Leave the military order and you can go." Chen Ru's body stiffened. "What are you doing? Do you think you can live after killing me? You wouldn't dare." Wei Wei Bai smiled and said softly, I'm so scared." After saying that, she pulled the safety of the gun. The crisp sound was like the Grim Reaper waving his scythe. Chen Ru's legs trembled. "Wei Wei Bai, don't mess around. It's useless even if you have the military order. You don't have the other one." In the case of half of the military order, she couldn't use it if she didn't have a child. But if she could get the other half of the military order would become a whole one. Chapter 1087. It was enough to order Fu Beige and all the bodyguards of the Fu family to stay in the city. But the other half was left with Fu Beige, so no one could have it. Wei Wei Bai gently approached Chen Ru. Her voice was soft and cold, like cold silk sliding past her ears. "Coincidentally, I also have half of it. I also have all the wealth and documents that Fu Beige gave me, and even the command of his bodyguards." After saying that, Wei Wei Bai pulled open the sachet on her waist. Chen Ru was shocked. Impossible. She was about to turn around. Wei Wei Bai held the sachet and mercilessly hit the back of her head with the butt of the gun. Chen Ru was knocked to the ground and fainted. Wei Wei Bai put away her expression and took out the military order and the military order that Fu Beige left on the table before he left, and put them together. Fu Beige was going to war, so he gave her the best things. No matter how well prepared he was. He also knew that war was not a game, so he gave her the best protection. Even if he did not come back, she would have a peaceful life for the rest of her life. Wei Wei Bai said, Tongzi, although the target this time is a hooligan, he is still a man. If a real man liked a woman, he would be responsible for her for the rest of his life. With a favorability of 80, he could already do so much. No wonder it was so hard to get Fu Beige's favorability. The system wanted to say that the previous targets were all very manly. But it remembered that they were all the same person. Wei Wei Bai praised one of them, so it did not say anything. Wei Wei Bai took the military order, put on a long coat, hat and gloves, and then walked out gracefully. The adjutant immediately came over. Madam, where are you going? Then he immediately opened the umbrella and held it above Wei Wei Bai's head. Wei Wei Bai looked up. It was actually snowing. Autumn left and winter came. Even the weather changed. Wei Wei Bai said, I know something happened to him. The adjutant's expression did not change. Our duty is to protect you and follow you for the rest of your life. There will be someone in charge of taking care of the young marshal. Therefore, from the very beginning, they did not intend to let Wei Wei Bai know that something had happened to Fu Beige. Bai Wei Wei revealed a smile that unexpectedly carried a trace of coldness. It was even colder than the snow. She said, well then, follow me. Go get the car ready. The adjutant immediately said, where does Madam want to go? Wei Wei Bai touched the military order in her hand. Go and bring my man back. The adjutant was slightly stunned. When he finally understood what she meant, he suddenly bowed respectfully to Wei Wei Bai and then asked someone to prepare the car. Wei Wei Bai boarded the train to the south on the same day. In the south, Fu Beige looked at the snow outside the window. He fished in his bosom and pulled out a handkerchief. Although the handkerchief had been washed clean, the stain could still be seen. It was the handkerchief that he had thrown away but then brought back. It was Wei Wei Bai's. He kissed the handkerchief and then leaned tiredly against the wooden box in the warehouse, enduring the severe pain in his chest. He did not expect that one of his trusted adjutants was a southern spy who had been lurking around him for more than 10 years. He had hidden himself well. Fu Beige had also been hit by the spy. He endured the severe pain and coughed. Hiding in this warehouse was not a long-term solution. His wound could not be dragged on. If it became infected, he might die. The biggest problem now was that he could not contact his army. His army had not suffered any losses yet, but because of his disappearance, it was only a matter of time before Li Xinghe took over. Wei Wei, you have caused me a lot of trouble. Chapter 1088. If Li Xinghe was dead, there wouldn't be so many problems. Although he was complaining, Fu Beige's eyes were still gentle and full of nostalgia. The snow in the north was definitely heavier than in the south. The weather was so cold, he had asked someone to hire a tailor in advance, so he must have prepared winter clothes. He didn't know if she wore any. With such a weak body, if she didn't take good care of herself, she would definitely fall sick. Fu Beige thought that if he couldn't get through this time, if he died, then who would be able to protect Wei Wei Bai like this in the future? After all, it was a chaotic time, although he gave her so much protection. But he still couldn't predict the future. What he wanted was for her to live a rich and peaceful life. Even if she didn't have him, it didn't matter. Fu Beige suddenly turned his head to look out of the window. Sometimes it was instinctive to be vigilant of danger, so he rolled away like lightning. Bullets were fired from outside the window, and the place where he was sitting just now was hit by a cloud of dust. Fu Beige pulled out his wound and took a deep breath. He leaned against the wall. Because he lost his gun when he fell into the water, he had a small knife on his finger. The knife emitted a sharp cold light, just like his eyes. The door of the warehouse was quickly smashed open. Fu Beige looked at the door coldly. Soon, a row of soldiers rushed in and immediately pointed their guns at him. They formed a tight encirclement. A man wearing an elegant gown slowly walked in. His handsome face revealed a trace of ridicule. "We meet again, Fu Beija." Fu Beija leaned against the wall. The wound on his chest started to bleed. He smiled carelessly. "Li Xinghe, I thought you were scared out of your wits because you ran away in my territory with your tail between your legs." Li Xinghe was not angry, but calm and composed. "Unfortunately, this time you are in my territory, and you are being chased like a mouse." Fu Beija sneered. "That's true. Every dog has its day. Who knows what will happen next time?" Li Xinghe slowly took out a gun. "But I won't be able to turn to you. I'm here to send you on your way. When your soul returns to hell, don't complain about your bad luck when you see the king of hell." Fu Beija looked around. He really blocked all of them. Li Xinghe had made ample preparations this time. It could be seen that he really wanted to take his life at all costs. Li Xinghe pulled the safety off the gun and pointed it directly at Fu Beija's forehead. He said coldly, "Don't look. If it were you, would you give me a chance to escape?" "No." Fu Beija's fingers were extremely tense. The knife in his hand was secretly pointed at Li Xinghe's chest. He was injured, so his aim was definitely not as good as usual, so he was waiting for Li Xinghe to shoot. Once the gun was fired, he would immediately throw the knife in his hand. He reckoned that he would drag Li Xinghe down with him. Anyway, if he died, Li Xinghe wouldn't be able to live either. Wei Wei Bai had saved Li Xinghe. If he died, wouldn't it be logical for her to be with Li Xinghe? Fu Beija wasn't that generous. He would haggle over every little detail. He didn't want Wei Wei Bai to have other men. If there was a ghost, he would definitely haunt Wei Wei Bai after he died. Although he wanted Wei Wei Bai to live a good life, as long as there was another man, he couldn't help but feel jealous. Li Xinghe held the gun for a long time. He hesitated for a long time before finally putting it down. He gritted his teeth and said, "Fu Beija, go." Fu Beija looked at him like he was looking at a fool. Li Xinghe's eyes turned red in anger. He said fiercely, "Wei Wei saved me twice. The only thing she wants in return is your life." Fu Beija was stunned for a moment. Li Xinghe closed his eyes and opened them again, looking at him with hatred. "She doesn't want anything, but she wants me to let you go once if I catch you." Fu Beija didn't expect Wei Wei Bai to make such a request. She clearly smashed his head to save Li Xinghe. But in the end, she wanted in return to save his life. Fu Beija couldn't help but smile. He liked this reward. He liked it too much. He was really happy that she cared about him. Li Xinghe saw him smile and said angrily, "If you don't scram, I'll give you 1 hour. After 1 hour, I will catch up with you again. At that time, I will kill you with 1 shot." Fu Beija forced himself to stand up straight and said proudly, "I don't need to scram. My woman wants me to live. Of course I have to walk out with my head held high." After saying that, he looked at Li Xinghe provocatively. Li Xinghe gritted his teeth. Why was this man so hateful? Fu Beija staggered out. When he passed by Li Xinghe, he suddenly said, "Do you know what Wei Wei likes?" Li Xinghe was stunned. He held his breath and looked forward to his answer. Fu Beija looked at him and said, "She likes me." After saying that, a knife was pressed against Li Xinghe's neck. This action was as fast as lightning. It was simply not something a human could do. He was clearly injured. He couldn't even walk properly. He was clearly protected by so many people. Li Xinghe was actually being held hostage by Fu Beija. Fu Beija raised his eyebrows and sneered, "I said, every dog has its day. Now it's on my side, Li Xinghe. Thinking about his woman. Even if he died, he wanted to drag him to hell with him. This was how jealous men were. Chapter 1089. Fu Beizhe stuck close to Li Xinghe, and was even taller than Li Xinghe by half a head. His eyes were sinister, and there was a hint of a cold smile. The thin blade in his hand was pressed tightly against Li Xinghe's neck. I told you to get lost obediently. After all, if you die, your family will really collapse. Li Xinghe's face paled, but he was not threatened. If you die, your power in the north will also be gone. I don't think the Fu family can produce another Fu Beizhe. Fu Beizhe, thank you for thinking so highly of me, so are you planning to drag me down with you? Li Xinghe's fingers clenched and loosened, and he was extremely nervous. Fu Beizhe's blade had already cut his skin, and blood began to flow down. The people Li Xinghe brought looked at each other, and they did not know what to do. After all, Li Xinghe was the only child of the Li family, and if he died, the Li family would really be finished. Li Xinghe's voice was a little hoarse. Even if I let you go, you will not abide by the spirit of the contract and let me go. Fu Beizhe's voice deepened. Everyone knows that I abide by the spirit of the contract, and I will definitely abide by my words. If you let me go and send me to my territory, I will definitely let you go. Li Xinghe sneered. Who are you trying to fool? Normally, you will abide by the promise, but if you kill me, the south will be in your pocket. You will definitely be tempted, and breaking a promise will not make you feel guilty at all. Sure enough, the person who understands you the most is your enemy. Li Xinghe was right. Fu Beizhe was such a hooligan. If the benefits were big enough, he would not necessarily abide by the promise. Fu Beizhe's chest hurt, and he knew that he could not hold on. But he didn't let anyone see his dejected state. They were holding Li Xinghe hostage, and they needed Li Xinghe to open his mouth before they would leave. If Li Xinghe insisted on going against him to the end, then they would really have to perish together. Fu Beizhe thought for a while, then coldly snorted and said, "It seems like you don't trust me. In fact, Wei Wei also asked me to spare your dog life if I catch you." Li Xinghe was silent for a moment. "Don't lie to me." Fu Beizhe was too cunning and shameless. He was afraid that he would be tricked. Fu Beizhe said coldly, "I won't joke about her words. I can go against my principles, but I won't use her." He would never use her as a tool for his own survival. Li Xinghe said, "If she was telling the truth, you wouldn't have killed me." The reason was just like him. He owed Wei Wei by 2 lives. But the more important reason was that he was full of feelings for her. He could only do this for her, so of course he couldn't wait to do it. Even if he knew that Fu Beizhe was a poisonous snake, he would still let him go this time. So out of empathy, Fu Beizhe wouldn't go against Wei Wei Bai's request and let him go. Fu Beizhe's voice was gloomy. "You're right, but I've already let you go once. You didn't shoot just now, and the knife in my hand didn't pierce your chest. In the end, it was still a deadlock." Anyway, neither of the 2 men believed the other. With Wei Wei Bai involved, the atmosphere became even more tense and scary. A love rival was always more hateful than an ordinary enemy. The 2 sides were in a deadlock. Li Xinghe almost didn't care about his life. He held his breath and let the blood on his neck flow down. If it was someone else, he might have already compromised. But it was Fu Beizhe. He didn't want to compromise. He didn't want to be inferior to this man. //. Chapter 1090. Even if he died, he wanted to let Wei Wei Bai see that he, Li Xinghe, was not weaker than Fu Beizhe. Fu Beizhe's eyes darkened, although his fingers did not waver due to his strong willpower. But he knew that he had reached his last moment. White snowflakes flew in from outside. A cold atmosphere surrounded the warehouse. Fu Beija gasped for breath and finally said, "Well, I didn't expect that the person who would accompany me to the Yellow Springs Road would be you." He believed that Li Xinghe would give him an hour. But with his physical condition, it was impossible for him to escape within an hour. Li Xinghe gave him an hour. He wanted to play with him like a mouse, then trample him into the mud and laugh at him, then kill him with one shot. If he wanted him to die, he wanted him to die without a shred of face. Fu Beija would rather die together with her than accept an hour's worth of time to escape. Especially when his love rival gave him charity. Li Xinghe's body trembled. He felt a pain in his neck. He felt that the knife was about to cut his throat. At the last moment, a sudden gunshot woke everyone up. Fu Beija suddenly opened his eyes wide and looked outside the warehouse. In the snow, a familiar figure stood outside the warehouse. She was wearing the peach cheongsam that he chose, and a beautiful winter coat. She was holding a gun and pointing it at the sky. She was like a flower in full bloom in the snow, emitting a strong light. The impact of this moment made Fu Beija stunned for a few seconds. If it was a normal situation, he might have been found by Li Xinghe and counterattacked. Li Xinghe, on the other hand, was equally shocked and did not react. That figure slowly walked over, followed by the adjutant in military uniform, who held an umbrella to block the snow for her. The atmosphere was so tense and awkward. But she gracefully and powerfully walked over. Fu Beija did not know why, but his eyes were a bit wet. The longing in his heart finally rushed out, turning into a lingering name on his lips. Wei Wei Bai. Ding, the male lead's favorability has increased to 85. Wei Wei Bai walked to the entrance of the warehouse, followed by the soldiers to protect her. She looked at Fu Beija and frowned. "Let go of him, Fu Beija." Fu Beija hesitated, then released the knife in his hand and directly pushed Li Xinghe away. Li Xinghe clenched his teeth and was about to say something. Bai Weiwei said, "This place has been surrounded by my people, no one can escape. You have been standing here for a long time, no one can let go of the other. I will be the middleman. Li Xinghe, you take the people away, I will take my husband back." Li Xinghe had a bitter taste in his mouth. Wei Wei Bai. Husband, what a close bond that could not be cut off. Wei Wei Bai coldly looked at him and said, "Do you want to fight with him? If you really want to fight, then this world will become chaotic." She slowly walked over to Fu Beija. "I don't want to live in a chaotic world, a war will affect my quality of life." Li Xinghe saw her walking over and just as he was about to take her hand, Wei Wei Bai suddenly raised her hand and pointed the cold muzzle at Li Xinghe. "Are you leaving or not? Your people are already under my control, so if I don't care, you will die." Her people were also Fu Beija's people. If Fu Beija gave the order now, Li Xinghe would become a sieve. Li Xinghe's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. "You are still worried about me." Wei Wei Bai said impatiently, "Get lost." Slash. Chapter 1091. Li Xinghe looked at her with a complicated expression. There was sadness, regret, and joy. Then he took a few steps back and ordered, "Let's retreat." Li Xinghe led the people and walked out. The surrounding soldiers also made a path for Li Xinghe. Suddenly, Wei Wei Bai's voice came from behind. "Take care, Li Xinghe." Li Xinghe stopped in his tracks. There were thousands of sighs in his heart, but the weight of her words was enough. Her heart, even if it had nothing to do with love, was enough. He also felt that it was worth it. Li Xinghe said, "You take care too. If you are not happy, come and find me." After saying that, he immediately left, afraid to see the scene of Wei Wei Bai caring about Fu Beija. And after Wei Wei Bai said the words, "Take care," the side mission was finally announced in an incomparably noble manner. She completed the mission. Every time she completed the side mission, it was like a roller coaster. Wei Wei Bai finally breathed a sigh of relief. However, a hand suddenly grabbed her waist and pulled her into a broad embrace. Wei Wei Bai could not react in time. Her whole body was already in Fu Beija's embrace. He frowned, his eyes were cold, and his whole body reeked of blood. He was like an enraged lone wolf, full of rage and aggression. "Take care. How much kindness do you have to Li Xinghe? Repay it all. Otherwise, don't blame me when I shoot him next time." His words were urgent and heavy. He was almost bleeding. Anger and resentment intertwined, and actually showed flustered and exasperated anxiety. He stood aside injured and looked at Wei Wei Bai. His eyes were always on Li Xinghe. She even asked him to leave. She even told him to take care of himself affectionately. What about him? Did he become cannon fodder in the background? Fu Beija's eyes were filled with cold anger. He was really angry. Wei Wei Bai turned to look at him and saw that his jaw was tense and even trembling. It was obvious how angry Fu Beija was. She suddenly reached out, grabbed his arm, and moved his hand away. He had no strength left, so Wei Wei Bai easily escaped from his arms. Fu Beija lost her and felt empty. His face turned cold. "Are you going to leave with Li Xinghe?" He still could not let go of Li Xinghe. Bai Weiwei's attitude towards Li Xinghe was too special. It made him feel like he would be abandoned by Bai Weiwei at any time, and then she ran away with Li Xinghe. Bai Weiwei walked up to him in a few steps and suddenly reached out to hug him. Her body was petite and warm. She said softly, "Don't be stubborn. I'm here. You'll be fine." His chest was full of blood and his face was as pale as a corpse. He was on the verge of collapsing and was just one breath away from dying. This man actually had the time to be jealous. Fu Beija's vision turned black. He leaned his head on her shoulder. Before he fainted, he did not forget to nag Wei Wei Bai. For example, he told her how to quickly evacuate from here. Which officer could be trusted, who was the spy, how to deal with it. He spoke very quickly. It was impossible to tell that he was half unconscious. His willpower was simply inhuman. His last words before he fainted were, "The next time you dare to be so nice to Li Xinghe, I won't be polite." How could he not be polite? He could not hit or kill her. He could not bear to do anything. He could only threaten her verbally. What a coward. Fu Beija despised himself and then fainted. Wei Wei Bai could not support Fu Beija. The adjutant behind her immediately came forward to carry him. "Let's go," Wei Wei Bai said to everyone. The time was too tight for this rescue mission. Wei Wei Bai did not care to maintain the image of a gentle woman. She had to be as cold as possible. Otherwise, how could she lead the group of soldiers of the Fu family? Because she had fully unleashed her aura, it made these people respect her even more. Obedience and respect were different after all. The latter could convince people. Fu Beija returned to his own army and fell into danger as he wished. The doctors came and went, guarding him day and night, afraid that their young commander would not be able to hold on and die. Wei Wei Bai also had a serious expression on her face. The time was getting closer and closer to 6 months. She did not expect that Fu Beija would be unconscious because of his injury. She did not even have the chance to increase his favorability. 85 favorability. It would be difficult to increase the remaining 15 favorability in a short period of time. Wei Wei Bai was discussing with the system whether she should spend some of her life points to buy some medicine for Fu Beijia. Suddenly, a muffled groan came from behind her. Wei Wei Bai immediately turned around and saw Fu Beijia looking at her gently with his eyes open. She immediately reached out and touched his face. It's not hot anymore. The critical period is over. When she lowered her head, she was as gentle and beautiful as a cloud. It softened his heart. In the past, when Fu Beijia woke up injured, he was either a doctor or a cold military officer. But today, when he woke up and saw Wei Wei Bai guarding him, he was very happy. Wei Wei, you saved me. I want to repay you. Wei Wei Bai, give me 100 favorability. Fu Beijia smiled. I want to give myself to you. Wei Wei Bai, what the hell did he mean by giving himself to her? It was more like giving his heart to her. Then she realized that Fu Beijia was kissing her hand and licking it wet. It was very ambiguous. She suddenly understood what he meant by giving himself to her. She slapped him. Hooligan, you might as well die. He was already so useless. His brain was still yellow. Slash. Chapter 1092. After Fu Beijia was out of danger, his body healed at the speed of a beast. His chest was bandaged, and he was wearing a military jacket as he leaned back in his chair. Even if he was seriously injured, it didn't affect his cold aura. The ground was soaked with blood, and the chill was penetrating. The adjutant who betrayed him had been hung up, and there wasn't a single piece of flesh on his body that wasn't injured. Fu Beijia looked him up and down, playing with the gun in his hand. His eyes were gloomy, but his expression was very relaxed. I didn't expect you to be the one who betrayed me. This sentence was very cliché, but Fu Beijia didn't feel any pain or sorrow. The betrayed adjutant trembled all over. Although the betrayer Fu Beijia had already predicted his end, he still felt a chill when he thought of this man's means of dealing with the enemy. Fu Beijia said calmly, "Do you have any last words?" The man suddenly cried. "Young Marshal, I had no choice. My family is in the south. I have to protect them." Fu Beijia pondered for a moment, then smiled. "That's true. You're a responsible man. Compared to your family, your women and children really don't have enough weight. I might have hated you before, but now I understand you very well." He met Wei Wei Bai. He thought about being together with Wei Wei Bai in the future, and even having a child. If someone used them to threaten him, Fu Beijia was probably willing to do anything, not to mention being a spy. Even more terrifying and immoral things were not a problem for him. He had never experienced the warmth of a family, and he didn't think that it was very important. But Bai Weiwei alone gave him a world that was warmer and more beautiful than fighting under the heavens. Her existence was enough to burn his heart. It was more important than anything else. The betrayed adjutant didn't expect Fu Beijia to say this. He thought that this man had no heart and was terrifyingly cold. He quickly said, "Young Marshal, I really had no choice. Please give me another chance. I won't betray you again." Fu Beijia said casually, "Oh, isn't your family still with Li Xinghe? If I let you go, you'll still deal with me for them." A fierce struggle appeared on the man's face. He suddenly gritted his teeth. "I'll fight with you. I won't betray you again. Even if the other party kills my family, I won't harm you." Fu Beijia looked up, his eyes were terrifyingly cold. The faint smile on his face also disappeared. "Say that again." The man said, "I won't betray you." Fu Beijia, the last sentence. The man thought that he could live, and a trace of excitement appeared on his face. He quickly expressed his loyalty. "Even if they killed my family," boom. The bullet went through his throat. The throat was not the heart, so it would not die immediately. He would only slowly suffocate and die with blood flowing all over his neck. The man's face was blank for a moment, and then there was a twisted struggle caused by intense pain. Fu Beija slowly sat up from the chair. He wiped the gun in his hand before putting it back into the holster. After killing someone, he did not show the slightest emotion. Fu Beija's eyes were full of mockery. If you had fought to the end, I would have respected you as a man. In the end, you changed sides and ignored your woman and child for your own life. Trash. After saying that, Fu Beija walked out. I'll leave the body to you guys. After solving the problem of the spy, his footsteps quickened. Seeing a familiar room, he pushed the door open and entered. He saw Wei Wei Bai sitting by the window. The fire in the stove warmed the entire room. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.